Good evening and welcome to the 17th meeting for the Planning Board of Fiscal 2023. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and introduce the members of the Planning Board and staff. We can go around. Cheryl?
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
And our members on Zoom, Rich? I can hear you. I think you're muted, Rich. Maggie? Is he muted?
We don't have sound coming through the screen.
Yep.
I can't hear Josh.
Maggie? Introductions? I don't think she's getting audio.
I think they're trying, but they're not
Yes.
getting through.
We're getting our audio and sound together. Thank you. So, Rich, why don't we go ahead and we'll introduce our staff, Tim.
Tim Zawinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
And Josh. Josh can get through.
I think he has the same trouble.
He's having the same trouble. So we're working on that. So welcome to Maggie, who is on Zoom, Rich, and Josh. Julia cannot be with us this evening, but welcome everybody. And it's really nice to be back in person, at least at a hybrid version. So while we are getting ourselves together, we can talk briefly about administrative items. We're in good shape as far as being caught up on our minutes. The last meeting was January 26th. I have not seen your edit, so
I haven't looked at the minutes. I'm sorry.
that's okay. That's what I figured, and and we're in really good shape with those, so no rush. And we can defer our January 26th minutes until the February 23rd meeting. We can go on to discuss our next meeting dates. The next meeting, we actually, and Tim will touch on this, but we have a great MBTA community forum that's going to be hosted on Zoom February 16th. I did want to mention, Tim, I found out that is Tucker's Unity Night for their schools. I know it was tough to get dates together, but I just wanted you to be aware because
so we'll be recording that and posting it, and we'll make sure that there's many more opportunities
that people can go on and take a
absolutely.
look at that. Okay, great. So that would be, I encourage everyone to attend that Zoom meeting. It's going to be really interesting. Tim will elaborate more about that, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. And then we also will have a meeting on February 23rd for our next, those will be the next two meetings that we'll be attending. Then we can now begin with a staff update.
Thank you. So a couple things, and it's funny. I'm in the building. My notebook is upstairs. It's usually in my bags. So we'll get used to being back in person. We've been working on a bunch of things. I think a few things that are especially relevant. I might have passed this along to the board. We did get a new batch of subsidized housing inventory units listed on our inventory. These are 40B units that were approved as a result of the 648 Canton Ave project, the residences at East Milton project, 16 Amor Road, 936 Brush Hill Road, and then 2 units at 92 Brush Hill Road from the Walkout Woods.
Can I just interrupt you for a moment? I have a message from Rich that says we can't hear them still. They can hear us, and they can hear each other. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah.
Can you hear
Good.
us now?
All right.
All right. So the problem is we can't hear them.
Correct.
Okay.
I think, are you still working on that? But that's the update?
They're not muted. I don't think so. Rich looks muted. Or
I'm
any-
speaking, testing,
okay.
testing,
Josh,
testing.
there you go.
You're Josh.
Can you hear it? All right.
Yes.
Maggie,
Got
can we
you
try
now.
you?
Got you now.
Yes, yep,
All
I'm
right,
here.
great.
Yeah, all right. Terrific. Thank you. That's great.
Bravo, and thank
Sorry
you
about
to
that.
the MATV team, who is excellent as always. So just to sort of keep everyone updated on all of this, the subsidized housing inventory is the 40B affordable housing list. When you approve a comprehensive permit project, a 40B project, all of those units go right on your list. The DHCD wants, they're encouraging you to approve these units. If a building permit isn't issued for a project within 12 months, then those units come off the list. Because what they're interested in is the units actually being built. You can't take credit for them for too long without them actually sort of getting built. So this is all relevant because through our housing production plan, if we hit certain production goals, which is approving subsidized housing units over the course of a year, we can get safe harbor from 40B through that housing production plan. But there's an ebb and flow as units get approved, and then if they don't get built yet, they come off, and then new ones come on. So we're in kind of an intertidal zone, as it were, with our SHI. So the 582 Blue Hill Ave project, those units, we got credit for them last year. They are now off our inventory because a building permit hasn't been issued. Our target is 98 units in a 2-year period, which is more than made up for by the Canton Ave project with 116 units. But again, that was approved on May 1st, I think it was May 1st. It was in May 2022. That gives us safe harbor for 2 years through the housing production plan.
So
But
2024.
that's not going to get building permits by May 1st, 2023 either. So those units will come off the inventory.
So our safe harbor is through May 2024.
It's technically through May 2024, but we lose 116 units that we got credit for on May 1st, 2023. Now then you have to look at what the approval date for the East Milton project was, which is a couple weeks after that. So we're back in safe harbor for a couple weeks. And then that one's not going to get building permits either by mid-May or June of 2023. So this is the way of the world with 40B. These projects, they're difficult. Some get appealed. Some it just takes a really long time to get building permits. They want you to do this in a timely way. So, Cheryl.
So just so we're all clear, the temporary safe harbor is something that fluctuates as these permits come and go. So it's not something they give you for 2 years and then after 2 years you come back and determine where you are. It's something that they're tracking all the time, that they know that these permits haven't been received.
So this was a question that we had when this first came up, where we had the housing production plan and we approved a big bundle of units through Blue Hill Ave and Blue Hills Parkway, with the understanding that one of those projects was going to sort of progress through, but one of them was very controversial. We knew it was going to be subject to an appeal by abutters, probably not going to get a building permit in that 1-year period. And so it was kind of an open question as to which trumps which, the 2 years that you get for approving the units, or the fact that after 1 year, many of those units are actually off your list. And as it turns out, the second is what, so they are keeping track of these units on a kind of ongoing basis. And so, and the other trick of all this is once those units are off,
So
they're off.
Right, so I have a question. Somebody has a piece of property and they're understanding that there's a temporary safe harbor. They can file, let's say in that 2 or 3 week period in May, they could file and we would have to accept that application, right?
Yeah.
Because
and
for those 2 or 3 weeks, we're out of compliance.
Well,
We've had new projects.
So the certification of compliance that we got from DHCD is like exclusively about the Canton Ave project, because that's the big one that sort of got us over 98 units. So that's where they sort of put their kind of dates on. It's the date of approval and then 2 years from that, but then there's the 12-month period. When I say then you go to the East Milton one, if we could make the argument that we still have safe harbor because we have 84 units from East Milton for a year of safe harbor from the middle of May till the middle of May 2023. I guess what I'm saying is after June 1st, 2023, we're out of safe harbor. So
that's the clear part. That's not too far off.
yeah. So and you've got to keep approving units in order to get back into that safe harbor. I'll segue into our work with the BSC group on the general land area minimum project. I've been in close contact with the engineers at BSC over the past 2 weeks.
Good.
It's a very complicated process, but they're doing a really, really good job. So I'm hoping to have a report from them in the very near future. The lead on the project is actually out until next Wednesday, but they're working hard on the project. I don't know exactly how it's going to, and what I've asked them to do and what the scope of work I asked them to do is just, assume these 40B projects are going to be built the way they're approved. That's the only assumption that we can make. And where does that get us in terms of, 1.5%? What I'll tell you, and I said this in an email that I had forwarded to the board, but if you look, and I don't know what the correlation between the land and the units is, that's the important part of that work that they're doing. But if you look at the projects that have been approved, we currently have 748 units on the subsidized housing inventory. We need 946 to get to 10%. If all of the projects that are kind of still outstanding or yet to be, so that means getting 582 Blue Hill Ave back, which means building permits, 20 units from 728 Randolph Ave, 90 units from 711 Randolph Ave, which is in the process of applying for building permits. That gets us to 942 units. So at that point, if all those projects actually happen, we are one project away from 10% safe harbor.
And that
permanent
does
safe
not
harbor.
include Winter Valley, correct?
Right. So the Winter Valley units, when they get built, 36 plus 942 would put us over the top. And then, we're trying to do something at Town Farm. There's another handful of units that are coming in from other inclusionary projects. We would be a handful of units away from 10%. I don't know how the GLAM is going to work out. This math gives me hope that, if those two metrics are kind of running head to head, that will also be in good shape on GLAM. But again, it assumes those projects actually get developed.
Right.
So that's a moving target too, GLAM,
It's a moving target until it's not.
until they're built.
Right. So, the reason why GLAM is a little bit more sturdy than the units is, that denominator changes. So if there's more development and affordable development doesn't keep pace with that, in the 2030 census, we may fall below. We're not taking land out of conservation restriction, and we're not demolishing affordable housing projects. So once you have that land area, it's pretty resilient. And so that's why it's important. That's why we talked about this a year and a half ago. Denny, God bless her, had the good sense to say, let's get that number, and so we'll know and be able to track
So
both of
did
those.
you say when we might have that? Would it be by June? So like when these others might fall off?
I can't imagine that. Yeah, it'll be by June.
Okay.
That's great.
I'm actually gonna, real quick before we move to Josh, because he's got a little news on some greenhouse gas and climate change planning that we're doing. But just really quick, Milton Landing, we've gotten our final deliverables from our consultant through our Mass Trails grant about the feasibility of a potential connection over the abandoned rail bridge behind 88 Wharf. We could build a trail over it. It'll hold up. It'll cost some money. But so that was exactly what we needed to hear from them on that one. The same consultant is working with us on a dredging feasibility study in the Neponset River from Milton Landing all the way out to the Neponset Bridge. Still waiting. Within the next few weeks, we're going to get a final report from them. I've had discussions with the Environment Department in City of Boston and also folks in City of Quincy. City of Boston is on board to continue the discussion on both of those projects, looking into, all right, we can get across the bridge. What happens when we get into Dorchester? Where can a trail potentially go? They want to have that conversation. And then the dredging project, very supportive of. We had gotten very close to getting a support letter for our original application from them, just couldn't get a signature from the mayor at the time, but they're supportive of that project. They think it's, it's going to really open up some really good opportunities for them. So we've got good partners on those projects. It's just all about now chasing, some more grant funding to do
That's great.
the additional study, and then eventually doing the dredging. If it turns out that that's a feasible option. Josh, I'd like to turn it over to you to talk about our recent solicitation for greenhouse gas inventory.
Thanks, Tim. And just confirming you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So we are working with 2 grants that we received. One through the Community Compact Program is providing us funding for a greenhouse gas updated inventory and pathways analysis for meeting sort of state emissions reductions goals. Our response window closed for that last week, and we received 2 excellent responses. We're going through this sort of contract process with the bidder who submitted the lowest bid, and should be getting that started within the next week or so, if everything works out on the contract side of things. They will be taking about 6 to 8 months to perform a updated greenhouse gas inventory. That'll be up to the international standards, the Local Government Operations Protocol, so that it's comparable with other cities across the state, across the country, and is using as up-to-date and as accurate data as possible regarding both mobile and stationary sources of emissions in Milton. They'll also be doing some high-level analysis of potential reductions, sort of pathways for us to reduce car emissions and personal home emissions, as well as municipal emissions that we have in the town. That will sort of dovetail nicely into the new Climate Action Planning Committee and help guide, with the technical aspect of it, guide some of their decision-making and the analysis they get to do. So hopefully that'll be really informative for that group. We're also working on a grant through MAPC's Accelerating Climate Resiliency Program to do the feasibility analysis for a microgrid project with Winter Valley, the police station, and Town Hall, connecting us on an islandable microgrid in the case of grid failure due to climate sort of disasters, intense storms, high heats, extreme colds. That project, the response window closes at the end of next week, and so we'll get those contracts started in about 2 weeks. We've had robust response so far, so we're expecting some really good consultant support on that as well, and have been working very closely with Sarah McLaren and the folks at the board at Winter Valley, so they're very aware and very supportive of that work. So those are the 2 climate efforts we're doing, and they should both be really helpful and informative to the Climate Action Planning Committee.
That's great, Josh. Thank you. Excellent.
That's it.
Okay, great. More to come on that. So we now, if that's everything, Tim, if you didn't have anything else?
That's all I got.
We can now move to citizen speak. Just for the public, we do have 2 public hearings, so you will have an opportunity to speak at that time at the public hearing on those agenda items. But if there's anyone who would like to speak on anything else, Zoom or in person, I would welcome anyone to come. Yes. Welcome.
I
Carol.
hope this is appropriate.
Please feel free to sit if you want at the table.
That's okay. If I supposed
Or-
to
They can't hear you.
They might not be able to
Do you
hear
wanna
you.
At least grab a microphone.
A microphone. Then
Yeah.
you can be heard. Yeah.
Okay. Carol Stalker, 291 Hillside Street, and I want to thank you all for the wonderful work you do. And Tim came and spoke to our neighborhood group the other day and gave
Good.
part of an evening away, and we just think you guys are wonderful. So the thing I wanted to mention was Alan Bishop did I'm on the street tree committee. He did a new map we asked him to do, which was a layered map that I think anybody in the town can look up on the town website. This was only a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to say that it should be up and running, and you can go to this map and you can find out if you live on a historic or a scenic road, which has special considerations. You can find out what is the setback for your personal property. Because we have a lot of people that don't know where their boundaries are, and they're different. They can range from a few feet from the road to the deepest one I know is 27 feet back. And a developer clear cut like dozens of trees, and he said, "Well, I thought I owned to the stone wall." I only own half of my front yard actually, because I have a 30-foot to the street, and I think the town owns 15 feet of it, so these setbacks can be considerable. And one thing that the Street Tree Commission, or committee that I'm involved with, is very concerned about is people cutting down trees on town land because they think they own the land. And we just raised almost $100,000 to plant new town trees. And we don't want people accidentally cutting down old town trees without knowing better, because they should come before the planning board if they want to do that. And so that's what I wanted to say. And also, if you want to ask the town to plant you a tree, because we are planting all these free trees, you can go to the DPW, website for the town and put in a request with your address. Thank you.
Excellent.
Before you
Thank
go,
Yeah,
may I
yes.
ask, do you know if the map that you're referring to is the GIS online mapper that I'm familiar with? Have they added layers to that now?
Yes,
Okay.
and they also put in the setbacks. Well, the setbacks were kind of there, but he did it so that he put it all on one map, so you can flip layers.
Yeah,
so
so if,
it's actually not on the main mapper.
okay.
I have a link. I'll have to figure out where on the site it is and how to get to it. But I'm looking at it, and Carol's seen it. I don't know if it's necessarily live just yet, but
Okay.
we can make sure that that's clear on the engineering site, how to get to it.
That's
Oh,
really
that would be
great.
wonderful,
Yeah.
because
Great.
it's so brand new, and.
Alan Bishop's amazing.
He's
really,
amazing,
we're,
and I really wanted.
very lucky to have
great
him.
appreciation and
Yeah.
thanks.
yes.
Okay.
That's
good.
great information. Good.
thank you.
Thank you.
My Eagle Scout project when I was a young man was to do a tree inventory in Bay, New Jersey.
So you appreciate this,
I'm looking
yeah.
at this map, and it's the exact.
That would be great, and a great, Milton Times article on this, on the scenic roadways. It's really been a challenge for our town and for people to be able to identify where their property ends and where the town.
So we'll make
Town
sure
begins,
that we
so-
know where that is
Yep.
and how to get
Too many
to it.
trees and stone walls have been lost, unfortunately. So thank you. Okay. Anyone else? And I don't know if we'll be able to see if anyone from the public on Zoom wants to speak.
Yeah, if there's anyone on the Zoom that wants to
Anybody
speak,
sees a hand? I don't-
you can use the raise hand function.
I think they can. I think,
Because I'm not on the Zoom here, right? So.
and we may not have anybody, but
I'm not seeing anybody.
There are no hands raised.
okay, great. Thank you. Keep an eye open for us, Josh. That's great. So moving forward, we can, if Ned Corcoran is on Zoom, we can open our public hearing at 1200 Brush Hill Road, the Scenic Road permit. Speaking of, continued from January 12th. And there's Ned. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I was really hoping to be there live, but we had a sudden issue with gas coming in from the street to the house, and got a technician coming to check it out. So,
That's
in
all
any
right.
event, I thank you. Again, this is a continuation of a hearing from last month regarding scenic bylaw and property at 1200 Brush Hill Road. It's the Brush Hill Care Center next to Flatley Field. I can share a screen and show
That would be great.
a couple of issues, if I may. A couple of items. The first, if you recall, is the plan that we showed with Brush Hill Road. This is the main entrance into the care center, and the property line that comes this way. There were 2 trees that were removed on town property at this location, and if I shift to the next sheet, there were 2 other trees that were removed over at the portion of the property closest to Fuller Village. One of these trees here and the other 2 trees are within the jurisdiction of the town because they're within the town's right-of-way. This tree and this tree are also subject to jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission because they were within 100 feet of the wetland down here. This is the edge of wetland here. So since we were before you last month, we've been to the Conservation Commission and have an agreement with the Conservation Commission on how to replace these 2 trees. And the agreement is consistent with the agreement that was reached with the Shade Tree Advisory Committee that we represented last month. Although I do note an email from Carol Stalker that the Shade Tree Advisory Committee met again and did a simple revision to their recommendation. It's a little bit different than what I understood the tree warden to have pursued, but it's my understanding that when I left the Shade Tree Advisory Committee meeting in December, that we were going to replace the 3 trees within the town's right-of-way at 3-inch caliper. And there would be 3 yellow woods, 4 white oaks, and 4 yellow woods, 4 white oaks, and 4 tulips. And then the 4th tree was a species to be determined later. Subsequent to that, the tree warden, Branch Lane, suggested that those trees should be 2 inches and rather than 3 inches because they might have a better chance of survival. The Conservation Commission suggested that they could be either 3 inches or an additional tree in each case to make up for the difference in the width of the trees that were removed. We're fine with 3-inch trees. It appears that the Shade Tree Advisory Committee went back and reevaluated that and suggests 3-inch trees. And it appears that they also suggest that that 4th tree to be determined would now be white swamp oaks. And we're certainly comfortable with that. There was also a recommendation made that there would be a $2,100 bond posted to assure their survival. So it's really the issue of 2 inches versus 3 inches, I think, is sort of moot, given the fact that there would be a bond to assure survival and would be obligated to make sure that any tree that didn't survive would be replaced. And that there was a specific maintenance regimen that was also required that would have each tree enveloped in one of these, I think it's an alligator bag, something where you pour water into it regularly, and that there would be a maintenance feature associated with that. We're comfortable with that. So assuming that the board is comfortable with that, we'd certainly agree to an order that would require each tree be replaced with 4 3-inch trees located inbound of the wall on our property, such that they would have a better chance of survival than if they were placed within the very narrow right-of-way between the wall and the street, and that we would perform the maintenance as required. So with respect to the trees, I'd pause there and see if there's any other questions or comments that any members of the board or the public would have.
Thank you, Ned. Carol, did you want to add something to that before?
Yeah,
Sorry. On that.
I agree with everything that Ned said. Carol Stalker, and I'm with the Street Tree Advisory Committee. And we did have a meeting. We did take this up again at the January 12th meeting and just refined it because Ned had sent a letter that said there was a 4th tree that wasn't determined what it was, so we wanted to suggest the swamp white oak, which is a different tree than the white oak. So there's 4 white oaks and 4 white swamp oaks. And just give him some guidance there because of these are all native trees, and the white swamp oak is very good at flooding and drought, and that is an area where they get both those situations. And we're all agreed on the 3 inches and the number of trees and the placement of the trees. Another fine point that we wanted to make was that the trees not be interplanted, interspersed, so you don't have, for instance, tulip, 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 tulip tree and oak, 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 oak. And this is because they're different shapes. So the tulip trees are narrow, the oaks are wide. So the oaks might run out of room if you put them all next to each other, and it would look more natural if you interspersed and also, kind of zigzag. Don't put them in a straight line if you can avoid it. And if you need more space, you can plant, I believe, we go on the assumption when we're planting trees that with the owner's permission, we can plant 20 feet inside the boundary. In other words, go into the owner's land 20 feet and it's still considered a town tree. So you don't have to leave it just along the street. And I think that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you. But I want to make sure that, to communicate with Ned as well as the board on this.
That's great. So Ned, is that clear? Is that your understanding? Is
Yes.
what you're stating? Okay, great. Okay, just members of the board, if anyone wanted to comment. Cheryl, did you have anything?
No,
more?
it sounds fine to me.
Okay. Rich, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay. Maggie?
No, that was my question, was just how come from December to the memo the other day that the size changed, but it went back to 3 inches, so that's great. And I just wanted to confirm that the trees will be cared for, for not a certain amount of time. Like I know, people are always careful to water for the first 3 years, but say in 10 years' time, if a tree dies, do they automatically have to replace it with another one? Is that part of their plan? So they'll monitor it, and if something dies, then it will just be replaced.
I would expect so. I mean, it's hard to monitor that from a regulatory perspective. There is a bond that would be required for 2 years to assure 2 years of growth, at the end of which, if the trees have survived, they'd be entitled to the bond to be reimbursed. But beyond that, it's awfully difficult to think that you could go a long period out in the future, other than you would pursue routine maintenance and, if you're trying to make sure that the property looks good, presents itself well, you'd certainly have an interest in making sure that the trees survive.
Great.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
And Carol, yes, you'd
Carol
want to.
Stocker again, I just got to add 2 points, one big and one small. And the small point is, these alligator bags that you see around town and that Ned is guaranteeing for these planted trees, they don't do well in the winter. So we're asking them to water, and anybody who's watching who's a homeowner should know this too. We're asking them to water once a week. You put a hose in the bag. There's a video that Christine Paxton did about it for it on the town cable news. That you water June, July, August, September. Then you take the bag off. You don't leave it on over the winter. Because it's not going to work next spring if it spends the winter on the tree. So you have to either replace it or take it off and store it over the winter. And I just want to make sure that Ned and the people at 1200 Brush Hill Road know that. And also people who have town trees, because when you see these things that are left on over the winter, they look pretty bad. They're not going to hold any water next year. So zip them off and throw them in the basement. And the second thing is, I really wish the bond could be for 3 years. When we did this at another area, the bond was for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, those trees looked really good and you knew they were going to live. But I'm not thinking 2 years is enough. So I would be in favor of 3 years, and I just raised that. Especially given the wacky weather we're having. Thank you.
Ned, do you think would your client be amenable to a 3-year bond versus the 2-year?
I think it'd be fine. I think it was, Branch Lane was the one who suggested 2 years.
Okay.
But, if the board thinks 3 years would be significant, I think we can live with that.
All right, that would be great. Okay. All right, so is there a, can we entertain a
So
motion?
if I,
Yeah, do you
if I
want to?
may, there's a second portion to this.
Yep.
I'll stop share and then reshare. And that deals with the wall.
Great. So you want a motion together? Okay, that's great.
Right. So yesterday I sent two sets of images. One was wall at Fuller Village, just up the street. I sent it after I had sent, I'm gonna find it. Let's see. If I do that, can you see that? Okay, this was, at your suggestion at the last meeting, you suggested we look at the Walcott Woods wall. And this is Walcott Woods. It's a photograph that I took and I just overlaid Brush Hill Care Center. I sent that to the client to review. I hadn't heard back from him until late yesterday. In the meantime, I forwarded this to Tim, and then I got this other approach, which is the Fuller Village approach, which they really like a lot more than the other. And so the question, I think, is for the board, is there a preference? I mean, this is a handsome wall. It's a little more ornate than what was done for Walcott Woods, but not substantially. And it's one that the client would really like to pursue if that would be acceptable to the board.
I open it up for discussion to the board members. If there's anybody who would like to speak to this.
Yeah, Meredith, if you don't mind.
Yep, go ahead.
So I do think that both samples of the walls are very impressive, and I think they're you know, they're very expensive to build. But to be honest with you, personally, I think I would like to see the walls reflect the history of Brush Hill Road and our other scenic roads. I feel like the walls that are being built today, even though they're really, really attractive, like this picture of the wall right here is very attractive, but I think it's not reminiscent of the historic walls that are on our scenic ways already. I would like to see more of a natural mortarless wall that's built with local stone and that reflects, you know, our cultural heritage of our areas. So I think I would like to see a little bit more simple and a little bit more natural looking, and that would just tie in with the rest of Brush Hill Road and the rest of Can Ave and Hillside Street. I think we just really do need to protect the look of our town, and I think it's special to see these rambling mortarless walls. So I'm wondering if they would be amenable to building something like that.
I know what their clear preference would be. It would be something closer to what they've shown, but I can run that one up their flagpole.
Cheryl, did you have?
Yeah, I think I had some photographs, I think, that were provided to us when this first came before us. And it does show the wall, as Maggie describes. And I guess what I'd be interested in is understanding how this proposed wall would interface with the existing wall that's still there, and whether they would be compatible or not. So, and the other thing is, I really, I'm a little uncomfortable with the juxtaposition of this sign on the wall. It's like I think they could be separate rather than, if it's this kind of sign, because you have a curved wall and a rectilinear sign that has some depth to it. And so it just doesn't seem as if they're in sync together, if you will.
I think that sign is in front of the wall.
Okay. All right. Well, there's not much distance in between it if I'm looking at the plant materials.
I think it's probably very close.
Yeah. And whereas the old sign was behind the wall and taller. So that I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of the wall being a little bit more rustic. I don't know if Maggie used that word, but it's kind of less formalized. I understand the maintenance aspects of the wall. But the other thing about the wall that was there, or that is there, is it's more rounded stones versus a flat cut stone. So this is almost as if you have a very flat surface on the vertical here. So it would be good to understand how this would look with the wall that's there on Brush Hill Road.
Yeah, I don't have any images to share at the moment. The walls that are left are very low along the edge of Brush Hill Road. They sort of rose up. There was a section of wall that was taller and that was followed the direct curve of the turn in and out. Which created a very narrow opening into the site. And one of the issues that was happening is it was getting damaged by snowplows that didn't have any room to do anything. And I know that once you get around that wall opening into the site, it really drops off to a loose stones that are about maybe a foot high. They're not really in a wall at all. It's just sort of old stones along the edge of the right-of-way. So they are proposing that something obviously that's different, and it wouldn't necessarily blend to what's there. It would just sort of come to a point and then disappear. And I think that the guidance that I think I'm looking for here is the nature of the wall, something that's more ornate like this or less. It sounds like the preference is for something that's closer to walkout woods, maybe without mortar, maybe utilizing as much of the existing, the old stone as possible, because most of it's there. And then infilling with whatever else is appropriate. Perhaps with some mortar inside that would hold it together, but not necessarily being as obvious here.
I do like the flat, simple cap on the pier.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and it's just, if you look, Canton Ave, it's a little bit unfortunate. It's one of our scenic ways, and I know that, if a wall is not existing and someone builds a new wall, they can sort of build the style in which, they want. And if you go up and down Canton Ave from start to finish, you see many, many different styles, and unfortunately, a new one is built just recently that is just not in keeping with the history of our streets. And I think these walls are just overbuilt. And I think using, to Ned's point, the stones that are there and infilling, and I think, the simpler, the better. And I think you don't have to drive too far to, understand what I'm kind of looking at. And I just don't want to see all these different styles of walls, especially on our historic streets.
And I think one of the issues associated with that, Maggie, is that some walls are on town right-of-way and some walls are on private property. If they're not within the right-of-way, then people can build whatever they want because it's not subject to the town's jurisdiction. This wall was within the right-of-way, therefore it's subject to oversight as to how it gets replaced.
Ned, do you mind stopping share? Because I've got the Google Street View up of the previous condition, just so we can see kind of what was there previously, which I think is a kind of, I'm not going to say compromise position, but it's sort of a little bit in between what's being shown and kind of what Maggie's talking about. So, still definitely more, built up than the surrounding wall, but maybe not as tall, maybe not as sort of monumental. And I'm just going to go down the street just a little bit to illustrate what you were saying earlier about, the condition of the wall. You can start to see kind of more of a pile than a wall, and then it becomes a kind of more, formally built structure over there.
Which is all the more reason to have it less formal at the curve,
Yeah.
at the entrance.
and I don't know if you guys were familiar, but like last year at Milton Cemetery, you know, we were fortunate that, you know, Lisa Hearn at the cemetery took on a restoration of the walls there. And it was put on by, or hosted by, you know, Mike Capio, who lives in town here, and he's a member of like the Stone Trust. And it's a fine art, and to make walls look natural and less stylized. So I think we're kind of losing some of our charm on our street. So again, in front of my house, I have a similar wall that I probably should rebuild because my wall kind of looks like that now. And one of these days I will. But I think it just needs to be repaired, and I don't think it's going to cost any more than what the applicant might experience if he builds a more formal wall.
To be clear though, Maggie, they're going to change the location of the wall so that it's not subject to as much damage. So they're going to open that up a bit. So they are going to rebuild it.
Yeah, we're probably gonna, the property line where you see that group of trees there, a couple of those trees were what were removed. The wall will probably go inbound of that, which is still within the town's right of way, but would be away from the effects of traffic turning in and out.
Did you locate the proposed location on a plan? I think that would be helpful. And the
I'll do
radius.
that. I
And
will
the
do
radius.
that. Yep.
And Rich, did you have any comments on this that you'd like to add? That we can hear from the public?
Nope. I don't want to repeat, so nope, we're good.
Okay. So I would agree, I think, with Ned, sort of what your latter and what, you know, Cheryl and Maggie were alluding to is a mortarless wall. I think that there's some consistency with the rest of the existing wall, that we try to look as uniform, build it up, but mortarless if possible. And then we do like I think the cap is nice so it does give a finished look to the entryway.
So when you say the cap, you mean the cap that's similar to what's at Walcott?
At Fuller.
Or at Walcott also. Walcott.
Just a plain.
Which is what I also had a question, Ned. Do you know if they intend to, have an additional sign? If they did do something with a Walcott type cap where they engraved it in the stone, would they necessarily need another sign in addition, or would that be sufficient to keep sort of the historical context? And I guess the other question is, do they, they're not looking to do any lighting lanterns necessarily?
I don't
on
think
those
so. I mean,
caps?
the Walcott
Does have.
image does have lights
Yeah.
on each of the caps.
Looking at the Google Earth view from these photographs, which I think is probably the same that Tim just had up, they have a flat cap, and then they do have a light on top of them. So it would be good to confirm whether they need the light there.
Yeah.
And I would, if you're going, that's why a plan is important, to see where this new wall is going, so that we can look at where it makes sense to have the sign in relationship. So if there's room to have the sign on the drive side instead of on the opposite side. But if since it's curving, I think it would be best not on the wall. And I wonder, from their perspective, Wolcott Woods, you know, people are going to know that that's where they live and where they're going. Whereas here, it might be people who are unfamiliar with where they're going, so they need to be able to see the sign probably. So it would be good to understand what size sign they think they need for the facility.
Yeah, we have a separate process going with the Board of Appeals dealing with a sign on the building that's visible, that's large enough and visible from the street, so people can see it. And there's an existing sign there. I'm not sure you know, that one's there. I don't think they have any desire to change it, so,
Maybe.
anyway, I think they liked the notion of the sign on the wall. There's a, you know, there's an ornamental component to that they seem to like, but I understand, but I'm hearing pretty loud and clear that that's not consistent with a vision for, you know, what the wall on Russell
Well,
Road should look like.
Yeah, I think if you make it lower, you're going to have a hard time fitting a sign that you're going to see if there's any snow on the ground. So I think you got to think about those together, the sign
Yeah.
and the lower wall and the style of the wall.
Okay, well, this is helpful.
Is that helpful? And is there anyone from the public too who has a question for Ned? Are there any hands or anyone who would like to comment? Yes? We have, yes, please, Carol, and just, welcome.
Ned, one of the things that is just coming up more and more is light pollution. And this is adjacent to a natural area. And I was just driving over there, and boy, that parking lot is lit up by like a Walmart's. It's got these high, lights, and they're very, very bright. It reminds me of when they put those blaster lights on the entrance to the Pulte development, which was, again, a nice natural area with wildlife, and then suddenly these blazing lights, and it just has a bad effect on the, well, we have great horned owls. They can't breed. They can't live their lives if they're in a parking lot that's illuminated. They need darkness. Everything has its diurnal rhythm. There's the daytime animals and nighttime animals, and you blast the heck out of these nighttime animals with a lot of light pollution, and there is a lot of light that's on that property already. And I would just, the only control the town has is just to make us stop and think about adding even more light, especially light that is not focused, but is just going in all directions along that edge of the town land. Because, there was a fissure right where you're talking about putting those lights. There was a fissure there, and it was dead because it was run over. That's why I saw it. But I mean, that's the kind of wildlife you have living there. These are high on the food chain animals, and they're trying to, make Milton a more interesting area. I like having those type of animals around.
Yep.
So-
Well, thank you. We can share that with the owner. Those may have been pre-existing lights before they even acquired it. I'm not sure, but was there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on the stone wall or the trees? Seeing any?
I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay. So Ned, if that's helpful, we can continue this until we can maybe develop a little bit more of a,
Yeah, that is, if you could continue to your next meeting.
the 23rd. Is that good?
And I hopefully have a simple plan,
That's great.
taking what I learned tonight. It sounds like we're there on what's necessary with respect to the trees.
Yep.
I can start to work on a simple draft of a decision that could be, that I'll
That would
have
be great.
available for your review at a next meeting.
That would be great.
We can
Thank you.
continue that to 7:05.
We'll continue it to 7:05 on, is the February 23rd date good for you, Ned? That's
like
our,
That's
to make
fine,
that
and if for
motion?
some reason it's not, I'll just ask for continuance.
I don't think
All
we
right.
need to motion for
We don't
that.
need a motion, okay.
all right,
Okay.
great. We'll
Thank
see you
you
on
all.
the 23rd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Would we be able to bump the A&R up? I think
I was concerned that they might, yes, we can spend more time.
that'll
Is
take
that-
like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we have a very quick A&R. Is that okay if we move that ahead? And then we'll move through
And
quickly.
you got plenty
Thank
of
you.
elbow room at the end of the meeting.
I
It's all
know.
yours.
All right. Thank you. Yes, all right, then let's bring our 400 Adams Street approval not required plan.
Oh.
Our attorney might have just stepped
Man, it
out of the
just like
room.
popped out. So I can
bring it up,
I
that's
can
what-
speak to this just briefly, and we can stall for just a little bit. So 400 Adams Street is a little bit on the East Milton side of town, right sort of near the base of Cary Ave and Pylon Road,
Yep.
I forget
Pylon,
whatever. So I'm just going to bring this up on the screen share for just a minute. Um, Sorry, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to zoom in real quick. Once the applicant gets back in, they can explain it a little bit better. But 400 Adam Street has this is all one lot right now. There's a garage kind of on this area. And basically all we're talking about is moving the lot line so that 392 in the back will now get this Lot B. And then Lot A will just be straight across like this. So not creating any more buildable lots, not doing anything besides just moving the lot line to enable the rear neighbor to take this little
Acquire
Lot
the
B.
garage. Okay. Okay. Should we step out? Do you want to just take a quick?
Yeah, let me take a quick look.
Hallway in the phone, and I don't know if any board members had a chance to look at this and any questions that.
I have one for Tim when he comes back.
Okay. I think I hear somebody on the phone. He might be outside. Good.
Life moves fast.
I know. That's all right. We'll keep it going. Cheryl had a question for you, Tim, on
Yes.
this.
Tim, normally I think on the plan it says Lot B is not a buildable lot somehow. The words being, I don't know if those are the exact words, but in the past, I know there was a specific notation that it would not be a buildable lot that's created.
We sometimes we do that.
Okay.
Sometimes we don't. I don't think there's any harm in adding that notation. I
Okay.
think, I mean,
Welcome.
it's pretty clear that it's not buildable, but
Right.
so I did a quick. You might want to grab the mic over there. I did just a quick rundown, but maybe if you want to just introduce your client and the project, and
Attorney Jeff Graber, and my client is Coleman Briggs of the
you should speak into the mic over there. You can.
33
Feel free to have a seat.
Berlin Ave. And he bought this, he does small construction company and he renovates homes. And he bought this from a bank. It had been pretty dilapidated, if you know where it was.
Yeah.
And he's now in the process of redoing it. And this neighbor approached him, and the lots are, it's limited access, and the lots are oddly shaped. And there was a dilapidated garage there. And he was willing to sell him off the garage and let him square off the lot. So, that's why it's going to be, it's only 535 square feet. It doesn't require any access or utilities, and so we thought it was appropriate for an A&R. Tim looked at it.
I think the only. Well, I mean, so do you have a Mylar printed out?
Yes.
How important is this to you? The one comment that we had was, if we would want to just put a notation that says that Lot B is not a buildable lot.
Yes, actually, that is on here.
Oh, is it?
Thank you.
We have to plan to do that.
I didn't see it. You just pointed out where it is for me.
Note, the purpose of the tenant plot is to convey and merge Lot B, not a buildable lot, into the
Thank you.
lot that Steve dates.
Perfect.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you. Yep, so we're all set
That's
now.
perfect.
Now, it's a hybrid meeting, so I'm not going to get everybody to sign today, so I'll leave the Mylar.
They can authorize me to sign on their
Oh, okay,
behalf, and
okay.
it'll just take 2 minutes, and we can get you out of here into the
That
registry.
would be fantastic. Do you want any extra of these plans?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
This is where we
I mean,
need
you
to
can leave
change
them and
in
we'll
those
deal with
rules and
them,
regs.
I'll leave you one extra.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Mylar, I'm going to have to record.
Yep.
But
Yeah. That's great.
I'm
So,
glad you're doing these hybrid meetings.
yeah, I know, it's good.
This is your first public meeting since?
We're back in person,
It's our
yeah.
first hybrid meeting like
Hybrid,
this too,
yeah,
so we're
we're-
getting used to it.
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the Quincy Conservation Commission, and we started
Oh.
a little while ago, but we didn't do the hybrid meetings. And I think that's a good
Yeah,
idea.
it's
because
a
there's
nice
some
way.
people who can't attend.
Yeah, it is
Well,
for various reasons.
are you
I would
looking for
entertain a motion.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'll make a motion to authorize our Director of Planning and Community Development to endorse this plan as not requiring subdivision approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second.
Thank you. And then we'll do a roll call because we are hybrid. So Cheryl,
Yes?
Maggie,
Yes.
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Get these out of your way.
And you're going to
Thank you
thank
for
them for
coming.
waiting.
And thank you for, yes, thank you for waiting. Great. Yeah. Good evening, thank you. Okay, so we can now move to our next item. We can open our public hearing for 440 Granite Avenue site plan approval. Welcome and nice to see you in person.
So we can see the screen.
Sure, we're plenty of seats, so whatever's,
Move the microphones, I think.
yeah.
You got that?
Thank you
And
very
if you need another additional microphone,
Yep.
Was that one?
yep. Whatever's more comfortable. Good evening, good to see you. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to be in person.
Much better to be together.
Hi, Tony.
You know.
There's you.
Hello, Marion and Michael.
Good evening and welcome. Go right ahead.
Would you like me to just,
Yes, please
Go
feel
into
free to
it,
go right ahead.
so the purpose of this meeting tonight is to open a hearing on a site plan application for 440 Granite Avenue. This is a new application. Some members of the planning board did sit through an application process last year, which we did not complete, but it was for a somewhat different design. So we're here tonight with a new application. I'm Marion McKettrick. I'm the attorney representing the applicant. Michael Moore is here tonight from Orrin Moore Enterprises LLC. I think Patrick Costello may be on Zoom also. Michael Moore is a Milton resident, and he is the developer of 36 Central Avenue, a mixed-use development in Milton that's been in existence for a number of years. Ellen Anceloni is here tonight, and as well as Tony Shao. They are our architects from the architectural firm Feingold and Alexander. And on Zoom tonight is Vinod Kalakari. Not sure, is that the right pronunciation? Vinod. He's the senior project manager of Vanessa Hagen Bruslin, VHB. That's the firm that prepared the traffic analysis for this proposal. If you can allow him to share, not share screen, but be a participant, I'm not sure how to do that.
He's up there.
He's available to answer questions. We don't expect to do a full traffic analysis tonight, but we did think that questions might come up, and we wanted to ask him to be here just in case. So this is an application tonight for a 4-story mixed-use building. It's located at the corner of Mechanic Street and Granite Avenue in East Milton. It's in the business district. We did present a larger version of this building last year, and we had quite a few hearings. That was for a 5-story building with 34 units. This building has 26 residential units, 1 commercial unit, 1,500 square feet, as opposed to last year's proposal, which was 3 commercial units with 4,100 square feet. So the building is shorter, the building looks smaller, and it has fewer residential units, and it has much smaller commercial space. And the reason for these changes, we got a lot of feedback, including from the planning board. We didn't reach a conclusion as to acceptance of the prior proposal. We were unable to schedule a meeting with the Board of Appeals. Both projects require zoning relief, and site plan approval requires that you have the zoning relief before you go to the planning board, or at least that you be working in sync on the two things. So we just gave up at that point, waited a number of months until finally we were able to get a first hearing with the Board of Appeals in November. And right away at the next hearing with the Board of Appeals, we presented this smaller plan. And we have now scheduled our next hearing for March 15th, but we would like to have substantial input about site plan approval first. So it is possible to continue that process, because you often have a change in the composition of your board when we have a town election. It's really important to try to get through site plan review now and before the election if we can. I'm hoping. We'll do our best. I know the planning board is busy, so. But it, so, we've, let's see, that's a quick review of what the application is all about. We have added quite a bit, some additional information this year that you'll want to review. One piece of information is that we have a parking demand management plan. This was requested by the Board of Appeals. This is a draft, so I'd like you to review it, take some time to read it through, see what you think, if you have some other ideas about what could be put in such a plan. The idea, we have two sort of conflicting issues with a development like this. One is, we don't want to bring more traffic to the square any more than we have to. And the other is that we want to provide enough parking so that we're not putting traffic on the street when it could be parked off the street. So the Board of Appeals, position, at least from one member, was, I don't want you to overpark this because we don't want to bring more cars in than we have to. We want to encourage people to use fewer cars, basically. That was one position, and that's why they wanted to see this parking demand management plan. But on the other hand, we did hear a lot about concerns about cars being on the street rather than, on the lot. That was a big issue for the amount of commercial space, much as we would like to have created more. What we are creating now is about approximately similar to what's there. So you have 2 commercial units on this site. They're approximately 1,500 square feet of commercial space, and that's what we're putting in, but there will be new, of course, upgraded commercial space. I think that's important in terms of understanding impact of this project on East Village Square. There are a number of materials we're submitting this year that some members of the board saw last year, and this is why they're the same. The engineering plans are the same, although I've gone through them and checked them and added some material that, I noticed wasn't missing, a plan here and there and that kind of thing. The traffic study is completed and was completed for the larger project. This is a smaller project. So you could infer from that, well, a smaller project is going to have less impact. And the conclusion from the previous year's study was that it was going to be a relatively small impact. However, we did ask the traffic engineer to go back and redo his study, his statistics, and we do have updated figures for the traffic report that are November 2022. As far as construction management plan goes, the stormwater management plan, and the long-term operations plan, those are the same. And the reason is that the footprint of the building on the bottom is the same. So even though the building's shorter, water's still going to hit the building and come off it in the same way. So the drainage plan that was revised according to what the town wanted us to do, that remains the same as it was last year. So you're seeing a plan that will have a date from last year. It's not inappropriate, it's not out of date, because the footprint and the drainage on this site will remain the same. The amount of pavement on the site will remain the same. However, the town required that we make the pavement pervious rather than impervious. So plans have been updated, and they were updated last year to show that pervious pavement, and I've made sure that that plan is up to date and is in the materials that are on the town's website. Just so it's, to reduce confusion, everyone needs to understand that you'll look at the materials that have been submitted this year, and you'll say, oh, some of those I looked at already, or there's an awful lot of material here. The engineering plans and the traffic plans have both been peer-reviewed, and for a larger project, and determined after any changes that were requested that the impact would be very manageable from this project. And we'll go into more detail about that and explain it probably in the next meeting, we hope. But I want you to understand why it is that some of the materials will look the same as last year. So this evening, we want to explain the architectural site plan. Everybody in the planning board has a hard copy with a big copy of the plan. We have it on visual tonight, and I think Tim Cherwinski is going to take us through the pages. Tony Shao will explain the site plan page by page. So we're going to go into that and spend as much time as we need to going through that. We expect it will take a while. If you need to interrupt us to ask questions, we're perfectly all right with that, whatever way you want to proceed. I know at the end you'll have questions and comments from the public too, so if it's okay with you, I'd like to turn it over now to Tony. and
please.
Go through this plan.
Thanks, Meredith, and thank you all very much. Appreciate being in person again, and it's nice to do this, to see you directly. So I'm going to try to go through this in a fairly clear but hopefully focused way. So I think, as Meredith said, is the biggest change that we are going to be showing tonight is a redesign of this proposal as a 4-story option. So let's advance to the next slide. Excuse me. And I think this is very quickly going to recap. Of course, this is the site that you know, 440 Granite Avenue, bordered by Granite Avenue and Mechanic Street in this particular location. Next.
So I'm sorry, Tony, but if you don't mind going back one more, Tim, because there might be people watching who are unfamiliar, because I've had a few people say, where is
Okay.
that again?
Okay.
So if you could just point out the existing businesses that are there so people can orient themselves?
And I can go through some
Yeah,
of that.
because Marion might be
Sure.
better, yeah.
I mean, how do you want me to do, you don't want me to go up and
Just
point?
just Tim can point. You can just say like the florist shop, the
So
kitchen
on the
shop.
left-hand corner, you'll see, you're familiar with a florist shop that's there now, and attached to it, there's a house. So it's a real mixed use. We already have some mixed use in Milton. On the right-hand corner, there's a commercial building, and it houses a kitchen renovation now. However, many of us in Milton, we call that Dave's Bike Shop.
Right.
Because for years, it was a great bike shop and a busy site, and he didn't make a fortune running it there, and he finally retired. But it was a small business that did okay on that location. Behind the commercial building, there's a residential building. It doesn't look old at all, but it's actually quite an old building, and it's one of the buildings we had to ask the Historical Commission about when we were talking about taking these buildings down, because these buildings will be removed if this development is constructed. And then behind those 2 residential buildings, there is another 2-family residential building in that corner, and that's one of the oldest. That building was built in the 1800s. It's always been a rental property since about 1860, when the initial owner unfortunately he lost the house, it was foreclosed, something like that. And a resident of Milton who lived on Brush Hill Road bought the property, and also owned the front property where the florist shop is, and just leased these properties for years and years. Then in 1916, I'm not sure why he did this, he gave the property to the town. And the town promptly went to town meeting and authorized the sale, and it went back into private hands. So all
Interesting.
of these properties have been used for small businesses. At one time, there were blacksmith shops here. These shops originally served the Granite Railway and then even the regular railway that used to run along where the expressway is now. So those are the existing buildings, and I think from that
And
description,
then just quickly, that's Citizens Bank on the left, right?
that's Citizens Bank on the left.
And the Southeast Expressway on the bottom.
Yes.
Okay, just
And
for
it's
orientation.
enough
purposes.
of
And
the
Mechanic
scenic
Street.
cars. I can't understand that, but I don't think I've ever been there when there weren't cars. But anyway. Okay, thank you, that's my introduction.
Yeah, thank you for interrupting, and sorry for interrupting.
No, of course. So I'm just going to state some of the facts about the project. So the parcel is 20,212 square feet. And what is being proposed, a total residential, retail, and support is 46,826 gross square feet. And also within that, there's parking of 9,260 square feet for a total project gross square feet of 56,086 square feet. The height of the proposed project above grade is 53 feet 2 inches, which we'll get into a little bit more detail. And the breakdown of the residential component is 26 units in total, of which 24 are 2-bedroom units, 2 are 1-bedroom units, and within that 26 total unit count, 3 of them are affordable. The project proposed commercial is 1 unit of 1,500 square feet in this design. With respect to the parking itself, so we have what we call a stacker automated system comprised of 38 spaces within that stacker, which is dedicated to the residential use. There's also a garage residential loading area, which is limited to 20 minutes within the garage as well. There are 2 handicap accessible spaces, therefore the total of 41 interior parking spaces within the proposed development. Outside the building, there are 6 commercial spaces which are available from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. during the day, and then in the evening, they become available as visitor spaces from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, off of Mechanic Street. Therefore, the total parking count, when you add both the internal 41 spaces and the 6 surface spaces, is 47 spots. Therefore, in the other calculation on the residential parking ratio, during the daytime, 41 spaces for 26 units is a 1.57 parking to unit ratio. And at the nighttime, when you add back in those 6 spaces, bringing the total up to 47, that increases the ratio to 1.8 parking to unit. In addition to that, we also have area for delivery for the building, which has 3 proposed loading, pickup, and drop-off spaces on and off Granite Street, which we'll see again in the site plan. And then finally, on the bike storage component, we have 10 bike storage areas within the first floor, and then additional 30 bike storage areas in the basement, for a total of 40 bike storage spots in the development. If there's no questions on this, I'll keep going. Okay. So this site plan simply illustrates the current condition that we just went through, that Maren presented, and the areas outlined in red are the existing buildings which are to be demolished, and the site, which is in yellow, also will be demolished to make way for the new proposed development. But this just basically illustrates in a site plan view what the existing footprint of those buildings are in relation to the site.
So Tony, most of this site is either building or paved currently, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
With respect to the site plan itself, I think what we're really trying to point out in this development is that the bulk of the massing of the proposed development is along Granite Avenue. And it's pushing the volume towards this busy street in order to keep the massing away and lowering it as much as possible towards the rear. And this overview site plan, just going to point out a few things. We're going to get in more detail in the next image, but this shows the development as proposed, again, with the building outlined in the front. There is proposed stepping down in the rear to a 2- and a 1-story situation, basically dealing with covering parking and terrace. And then on top of the building itself is proposed a solar PV. I will point out that in this proposed development, we're trying to produce as much of the sustainable strategy as possible. So this will be an all-electric building. We already had a proposal for a stacker automated parking system to allow us to get more cars in a much smaller footprint that's also, frankly, less energy dependent. It uses less gas because cars are not moving in and out. And we also intend to use the solar PVs in order to generate as much on-site electricity that can support within the building. So the intent is really to try to create a sustainable development as we can. Okay, next. I'm going to try to spend a little time on this. I'm not sure if I can stand up. I'm going to try to do this because it's a little easier point. So I'm sorry for those behind not seeing this, but this shows the planned development here on the ground floor. Granite Avenue is at the bottom of the page. Mechanic Street is here on the diagonal. And essentially what is being proposed is that along Granite Avenue, we are activating it with commercial at the corner of 1,500 square feet and 2 residential units here outlined in this sort of pink color along the edge here and here, with a residential lobby shown in this location in the approximately the middle of the site. Behind this component along the street is the stacker parking situation. So it is accessed off of Mechanic Street. You come in here, cars load into the stacker system. There are 38 parking spaces within a 3-story stacker arrangement. And then in addition to that, we have 2 handicapped parking spaces here, and then 1 additional space for this loading on a temporary basis for up to 20 minutes for the residential use. In addition to that, behind the building at this edge off of Mechanic Street, we have 6 outdoor parking spaces, which are both designated during the daytime for commercial use and the evening for visitor parking use. So again, that is what brings 41 inside, 6 surface to 47 total spaces.
Cody, can I ask one question?
Please.
Can you, behind where the vehicles are parked, can you demonstrate where the sidewalk is behind that and where the road begins, just for clarification?
Sure. So what we're proposing here, and this great question, thank you very much for along this edge here and here, we are creating a new sidewalk edge. It'll be a granite curb. Currently along Mechanic Street, there actually is no sidewalk. mean, it just literally blends into the back. So we are actually defining it here. With respect to the 6 parking spaces, you can see where the property line is here in red. That is at the edge of the property line, and it is approximately on the order, I'm guessing, about 6 feet or so behind where we're creating this new edge of sidewalk against here on Mechanic Street. So that distance is approximately 6 feet off the sidewalk. So this is essentially the sidewalk zone that occurs here and here. And with respect to the sidewalk, a couple things I'm also going to point out. So in red in the outline, this is the property line, which you see here. So the sidewalks are also increased on the ground floor. So for example, along Granite Avenue, the sidewalk depth to the base of the ground floor building ranges from 10 to about 12 feet in depth. Currently, we sort of approximated it's about 5 to 7 feet now. So we're adding roughly 4 to 5 feet additional sidewalk width than what exists. And of course, on Mechanic Street, we are creating a sidewalk here, which doesn't exist, and this is 10 feet from the edge of the curb cut to the edge of the building. The other part that I'm going to just point out with respect to property line setbacks, so on Mechanic Street here, the building on the ground floor is held back 5 feet from the property line. Again, 10 feet total from the building edge to the edge of the granite curb. And then along Granite Avenue here, this distance here is also approximately 5 feet from the back of the property line to the edge of this component along the edge. And then we have additional about 5 feet more here. It varies, as you can see a little bit. It's narrowing slightly at the corner here. But again, 10 to 12 feet of sidewalk. And then we'll talk about a little bit in a minute that on the floors above this, because we are building out slightly the massing. So on the upper floors, this is, you can probably just barely see this dashed outline. That is the upper floor component. So in this instance, it's extending out about 3 feet above the ground floor on both sides. So hence the distance from the property line in the rear is 2 feet, and it's also 2 feet approximately on the front. So I hope that's relatively not too confusing. And then the other things, as we mentioned, with respect to the other aspects about the site itself, as we mentioned, we're proposing granite curbing, brick edge. We actually were looking very carefully at what's happening in the shopping area further up the street. So we wanted to use a lot of the similar, materials and language being taken from your local neighborhood context. New planting of trees here, here, and here, and here. We're also proposing along this edge to create a buffer against the adjacent properties. There will be, in this instance, more of a kind of a planted edge to help screen against this residential neighbor. Along this edge here, there's just going to be some portion of this which is paved, which allows access off of the support and egress, but essentially we're also trying to create as much green buffer along this edge as well on the west. And other things, just simply point out that the transformer location we are proposing underground, so we're able to remove it from what was previously shown that was above ground. That's in frankly enabling us to do the additional parking spaces here off of Mechanic Street. And then other things like trash, recycling, support, et cetera, basically occurs along here. So this is really representing the overall site plan with respect to the proposed development. And then finally, of course, not least, along Granite Avenue itself, we have 9 striped parking spaces here, and then 3 additional drop-off loading areas here, here, and here, which are striped. So basically can accommodate, up to 3 vehicles, or if you have a larger, say, truck moving in, that can take up along this edge, because this 3 spaces is more than sufficient length to handle larger vehicles for loading and receiving. Any questions related to this before I move on? Okay.
Any other members have questions? I don't know. Anybody else? Not yet. Okay,
Not yet.
thank you. You can keep going. That's
Sure. Okay. So this is just.
I'm sorry. I had one question. I was on double mute. I didn't realize it.
Sure.
Right. Yes, Rich.
Can you go back one to the other side? Just a quick question. We're down the bottom where it says Granite Ave. A little to the left, there's a number 6. Is it just the view on here, or are some of those parking spots different sizes?
Oh, I think that you're probably talking to the graphic size. They're intended to be the same size. I think there may be striping issue.
I assumed, but I figured it out.
Yeah, no, they're intended to be the same size for a conventional parking space along Granite Ave.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
And I do want to add, anything on the street, like the parking spaces and the loading zone, that's all subject to town approval. We are not assuming that we can just design for the town.
No, of course not.
Correct.
Yes. On the lower level plan, this just simply illustrates what's happening in the lower level. So again, the automated parking system, which is zoned here, that's what happens when you move those parking in and they stack. And then beneath that, also along the edge here, this is where we have both bike storage here, the 30 spaces, plus storage for the units, the dedicated up to 33 storage units for the 26 residential. So we're providing additional storage for the residences. Okay. And then as we move up to the second floor plan, this is where really the bulk of the residential units start. In this instance here, we have a total of 9 units, of which 8 of them are 2 bedrooms, 1 of them is 1. Again, this is one of the 1-bedroom units that are shown here. Pretty straightforward plan. You can see the main difference is that, as I mentioned, this is about 3 feet extending out above that ground floor plan in terms of its overall footprint. And we have in the back of this area here, these are private terrace area off of these units at the rear. And then we have a green roof, which is basically mostly covering the areas underneath, which is related to the parking and other things, and part of those pull-in off-street parking along Mechanic Street. This is what this green roof is basically over. Next plan, level 3, very similar to level 2. Again, 8 units of 2 bedrooms, 1 units of 1 of 9 units total. It's pretty much identical plan. And then there are some small private terraces and decks out here. And then on the next level plan, which is the 4th level, we're basically pulling it back. So here you can see that the outline of this floor is shown in this location. All along this edge here is approximately at least a minimum 5-foot depth for a continuous roof terraces for these units. These are larger units on this level, and they're only 2-bedroom units, and there's 6 of them. So this is showing that we are massing back along the corners and along the rear in terms of the overall massing. And then finally, at the roof plan itself, again, we have shown here in blue the solar PV array that is being proposed. In the area here, we basically screen off the mechanical units here. There is a necessity for one of the stairs and elevator overrun for the penthouse to come up. We'll talk about that in a minute in the elevations, but this is what's basically represented here. It's essentially all mechanical systems, solar PVs, and the only access you would go for is to service these units up here. Nobody comes up here. These are not roof terraces or any units. Okay, on the elevations, I'll let it catch up. So this is an elevation along Granite Avenue here. This is an elevation in the northeast, basically along Mechanic Street here. The main thing I just want to point out in these elevations is that the key thing to understand is that the overall 4-story building height is 53 feet, 2 inches to the edge of the parapet, and then it's additional 8 feet for the mechanical screen on top of that. And I think the total, I'm sorry, this is covering up the numbers here, but 61 feet, 2 inches to the top of the essentially mechanical screen and elevator penthouse override. And this along the backside on Mechanic Street here, this is again, I know it's very hard to see in this drawing, but this is where it shows the stepping of the lower roof and the second floor and then the 2 additional floors. And it's showing the setback on this top floor here, which is held back at least 5 feet along the edge. And perspectives will be more revealing on all of this. And then the 2 other elevations on the north and northwest, again, once they sharpen up, essentially shows the same thing. So these are just partial elevations because they're turning the corners in both views, but it's essentially showing the very similar treatment along here. Heights are the same as before that I just mentioned. And as we wrap the corner, we'll talk about the materials that are being proposed. But this essentially shows mostly the rear portion and the side portion of the proposed development. With respect to the materials, we are looking at a combination of mostly, we are proposing brick along Granite Avenue, which is shown here as sort of this Aircraft, a kind of light gray color, which has a pretty mottled but rich effect. The other elements here we also have is essentially fiber cement panels, which mostly occurs in what we call the recessed niches, as well as along the backs. We have additional along the bottom level aluminum composite panels, primarily relating to the retail base, as well as sort of the sign band location that occurs between the ground floor retail and the residential above. We do propose a granite base continuously around all of the building at the ground level. And then there are a mixture of fiber cement panels of different colors, different sizes, matching around the rest of the building. This is just a photograph of the proposed linear brick that we did mock up. I think some of you may have seen this, but this is what we're looking at. And the actual type of brick we're exploring is the longer type brick. It's a Norman brick, so it has a greater linear length to it than conventional brick sizes. We believe this lends a certain heightened elegance and a little bit less sort of, it feels in some ways a more elegant dimension and size and type of brick. This is a kind of 3D axonometric of how all these materials come together. So along Granite Ave, again, this is shown, the main facade is this linear brick shown here. The window composition consists of several things. We have essentially a precast lintel frame, which is indicated in this darker gray. Then, of course, we have the windows themselves. The niches, which notch in on each facade, is proposed as fiber cement panels. When we come to the corner where mechanic and granite meet, this shows a transition here, and we're moving from the edge of the brick to the fiber cement panel. Again, here we have fiber cement panel in this instance on the sides here and here, and then there is literally a break metal. It's a separation between the brick to the fiber cement panel as a transition element, and we'll probably have color introduced here, which we're starting to suggest and starting to look at here. Other things that we're also looking at on the ground floor, this shows kind of a representation of an idea related to the base. So it will be brick, but we're also thinking of introducing kind of a siding pattern here to create more scale and texture. We're also looking at doing that on the upper windows too, to introduce more scale. So we want to try to make more human scale along the facade to break elements down. So this shows that, and here you can see the granite base that I just discussed before, and then basically the fiber cement panel above. So now the next things are a series of views. This is a view that exists currently along Granite Avenue, and here you do see cars. So the design that's shown here represents, as we said, a 4-story mass, which we have reduced from the previous time we were here. It still has the ground floor development for retail. Some of this is still catching up, so we know that from this point back, because these are residential units here, the design and treatment of this is going to change from this. This is not going to be all glass. We don't want to make those residents feel too exposed. But essentially, that's what's developed here. And then here you can see this is the brick that occurs here. These are the niches. And I will say that the reason why we did the broken niches is in order to break the scale of the mass down. So in order to take this length of building and scale it, we are introducing those niches in order to help mitigate the overall mass. And then here you can see on the 4th floor how it is set back from the edge along the corner and along the rear. And then the fiber cement panel begins to wrap along the edge. Now this view along Mechanic Street, and here you can clearly see there is no sidewalk. So the proposal is that once we get onto our property, that there will sidewalk continue here. And here you can again see how the bulk of the mass is really pushed back towards Granite Avenue, and it is stepping away. So we have the 1-story element that covers underneath the parking in part. It is proposed with a green roof. And then the 2nd floor terrace off of those rear units are shown here. And then there will be a series of small balconies related to some of these units. And we're also breaking the niches here as well to also further break down the scale of the massing on the rear as well. And then you can see, of course, that the top floor sets back. I'm not going to get into these plans. I think we're going to bypass most of this. This is, if you have questions, these are the lighting plans. And the main thing that we want to point out, we can go pretty quickly to this, Tim, is that on the lighting photometric, of course, our aim is to minimize any light pollution. So all light sources are going to basically dissipate and not have night sky problems, not cause glare problems. We want to really downplay the lighting to the greatest extent we can, certainly to meet city requirements, but also just for being a good neighbor. So I think everything we're going to do is to minimize light pollution. And these are just, again, photometric. And these are catalog cuts related to the light fixtures. We don't have to get into this right now. And then finally, these last few images here relate to developments on the landscape. So it's again a little bit more detail. There's certain areas that we're going to call out, such as the trees, the kind of arborvitae bushes, the landscape edge, the green roof, elements that occur along the side. So just the next few images, and we'll talk about the green roof, just going to show you what we proposed. So essentially along the trees, we're looking at a range. These are the types of trees that working with the landscape is being considered here, and these are the species that we've been examining. We're going to have some low areas around the planting along some of the niches at the base. There are going to be some Virginia creepers and vines along the elements. On the areas we're trying to screen to the neighbors, we're looking at arborvitaes to help mitigate its resistance to the neighbors. And then with spark to the green roof, fairly conventional sedum green roof along that upper part also helps with surface runoff, of course, to mitigate some of the rain that occurs along the site. And here you can see some of that a little bit closer up. So again, here you can see the arborvitae hedge basically to try to screen against the neighbors here. This is showing the green roof planting and various other sort of plantings along the terrace. And then I think some of you may have actually seen this in person. The proposed automated stacker parking system basically allows us to load 3 levels of parking within a very small footprint, and it's all mechanically operated. Once you pull your car in, eventually it takes the cars and moves them up and down to position these 38 spaces within, and they are able to accommodate up larger SUVs. So it's not just for conventional cars, we can also accommodate larger cars. And then finally, these last few images are the shadow studies. So the top row here shows June at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., and the bottom of September at the same time. The area in purple just illustrates the extent of shadows that are being cast from this proposed development. And you can see, particularly in the summertime, there's almost very little shadow cast into the neighborhoods because, of course, the sun is high. So the shadows cast along granite in the morning, a little bit along the edge in noon, and then a slight bit more along mechanic on the back, but all fairly contained. And then in September, the shadows do lengthen a little bit because the sun is, of course, getting lower. But again, you can see in purple the extent of shadows at 9 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m.
Tony, just for clarification, there's a gray underneath the purple. The gray is the existing shadow, correct?
Yes, it is. And we have a larger shadow study image to follow. It's going to
Okay.
explain exactly how much new shadow is being cast by this event against what exists.
Okay, thanks.
So December, of course, December has the steepest amount of shadows because the sun is lowest in the sky. So again, in the morning here you can see the shadows casting this way, and as Cheryl pointed out, the gray is what exists underneath it. At noon, it's beginning to shed this way, and then of course, the greatest shadow is occurring in the afternoon on December 21st in this direction. And then when we come back to March, March is very similar to September. It's just the equinox in the spring versus the fall. And then here,
Can I just ask, what's the percentage increase in shadow?
I don't think we have an exact,
Well, I think we need to look at these next slides.
yeah, that will give a little bit more
That really
indication.
illustrates, Maggie, how much of an increase is added by the building as opposed to the existing shadows. And then we don't have a number for that, but I think that these do illustrate visually for you how much that is.
So this analysis here was taken for December because December is the most, auspicious issue with regard to shadow because the rest of the time of year is much less. So we're just looking at intentionally at December. So December 9th, this is the existing shadows, which is highlighted in purple here, cast by the existing buildings on the site. And here you can see, relating to the new shadows that are cast by the new development proposed in yellow, is shown in this kind of blue-green. So the area that's cast from the shadows is shown in highlighted color here that differentiates it against the existing shadows that occur now. Sorry.
So it just might be helpful to know the percentage.
Trying to clarify to me. And then if we look at noon, these again, the property being here, these are the existing shadows cast in purple on the adjacent parcels. And again, in green, this shows where the additional shadows are cast as a result of development. And again, because push the development mostly to the front, we're trying to minimize as much towards the rear. And then, of course, on December 3 p.m., which is the most extreme condition, here again you can see the existing shadows cast in purple by all the properties, including our site. And then here, the areas that you can see in blue overlapping that, this is where the additional shadows result at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on December 21st. And then these last few minutes, I promise we're almost done. So these are the images taken along the Granite Avenue and the expressway. So now you can see the proposed development as it relates to the streetscape here and viewed along that edge. This is a sketch we actually had from before, but this is still showing that we are proposing a development of the residential entry along Granite Avenue to be, nicely scaled and nice materials. Previously, we had also been showing this corner condition here. Now, of course, this is only illustrative. We do not know who the retail tenant will ultimately be, except to say we know it's not going to be a restaurant, a cafe, or high traffic use. So whatever tenant does eventually take charge or takes possession of being the leasing, that will be determined, of course, with subject to reviews. And but the intent is to create something that is inviting and attractive and hopefully of local neighborhood presence. And I think that's it.
That's all she wrote.
That's great. Thank you, Tony, very much. Nice.
Just, if I could just add
presentation. Yeah.
just a couple quick comments. They're just details, but there's a landscape plan and there are street trees. We've added street trees as we've been discussing this. More trees were requested. But I did want you to know that STAC, the Street Tree Advisory Committee, has reviewed the trees, and the present plan reflects their advice. So they are flowering, trees that flower in the spring, and so the species that are shown in this plan have been reviewed by them, and they're designed in part to be an appropriate height for this site, and not too high, so that they kind of fit under there's a 17-foot height up to that first overhang on the side. So these trees are supposed to fit in to that height, and they are also supposed to be trees that have a reasonably good chance of surviving. But the development, which will be a condominium, is intended to be responsible for maintaining the trees forever. So these are town trees on a town street, so this would have to be a condition in any decision from either you or the Board of Appeals. But we know that it's a very inhospitable site, the part of it that faces the expressway. And the idea is to try to introduce some potted plants, and there's a planter on the corner, and then a lot more trees, but the trees are going to have to be carefully maintained. So there will be exterior locked spigots so that the development can arrange to, just as we were hearing earlier tonight, to water the trees appropriately, and if they don't survive, they'll have to be replaced. So that's just something to think about. I know it's only a small detail, but we feel that one of the improvements that you get with this bigger building, with the investment that goes into it, is that you can put some money into the street, and the sidewalk around the building, and try to make it a little bit more walkable. It's never going, there's always going to be noise from the expressway on the ground. There's always going to be a lot of wind from the expressway down there. It's not a place where you're going to sit out on a bench for 5 hours or anything, but you do have to walk to get from one place to another. So the idea was that with this building would come a much more walkable sidewalk area. And hopefully the one commercial space on the corner, the idea would be that that would be a business that people would want to stop in and visit, pedestrians would. So I don't, we don't yet have a tenant. We're always interested in ideas. If anybody has suggestions or ideas going forward, we'd certainly like to hear them. So there's just a couple quick comments. Also, for those of you on the planning board who have not visited this type of automated parking facility, we would like to arrange a time for you to visit one. We have one in South Boston. We've taken some members of the planning board to see, and I think we've also taken some members of the public to see that as well. So if you, are not, you're probably not familiar with this type of parking system. I was not. It is very interesting to get inside a building and see how it works, see how long it takes to bring a car down, put it up, see what the safety features are, and where the mechanical controls are and that kind of thing. So I do recommend that you contact, unfortunately, I'm sorry, but it has to be Tim Cherwinski. He will then get in touch with me right away, and we would come up with some dates for a visit to a parking facility, because I think there will probably be, there are always questions about that from anybody who hasn't seen one of these in operation before. So thank you. Just a couple of extra comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As always, you do a wonderful presentation, Tony and Marion. Thank you very much. And I do have...
Can we
Yes.
have a staff report? Can we have a staff report? Sorry, I want to speak up a little louder. A staff report on this application?
I think not yet, because I think we don't know, we're not quite, it's a little preliminary to do a staff report on this.
Do you have?
I know they're working on doing something, but I
Okay.
think it's a little preliminary to
Just,
to comment until we,
okay, how about at least on the site plan approval process, what that entails, just because we do have some new members that may not have understood this in that context?
we can do that, but yeah.
Yeah,
You wanna just
that's.
Give some
that's-
overview of the process.
Just for the public who's
Sure,
watching
yes,
too, to
but
understand the
just-
process
yeah,
that we go through.
Not quite
Yeah.
ready on the
Yeah,
report on this project.
that's fine. We did do our usual technical review on this application just to sort of check it for completeness. We had Marion be sort of the test subject on a web-based application form that we've been trying out. Some bugs, but I think it worked out. Just for your kind of own kind of individual information, if you look in your package of excuse me, of materials, it's the one that's labeled Site Plan Application Cognito form. It's called Cognito because that's the program that we use. But what we're trying to do in this, and I'm going to share this on Zoom just so folks at home can see it real quick, is to provide a means by which applicants can have a standardized way of presenting and submitting these applications. What it really basically does, as I scroll through here, is some contact information, and then just the conditions that are in the rules and regulations, so that the applicant can just say, here's the answer to this question, here's the answer to this question, here's where you can find this answer in our materials. That leads into the information that Cheryl was looking for, is what are the conditions for approval for site plan review, and what are the submission requirements. This application is pegged to the submission requirements. Hopefully it makes your job a little easier, so that you can say, did they provide a written description of the site's current uses, such as watershed, wildlife habitat, etc. They did, so good, we can check that box. I'm going to stop my share. We've been through a couple site plan approvals, I think, recently, but I think it always bears reminding about what the what site plan approval is. And we talked about this in the last iteration of this project, the sort of unique-ish nature of this particular application. We've had others that are similar to it, where it's not a zoning compliant project, so you need the zoning relief. Site plan approval in our bylaws contemplates a zoning compliant use. And the principle behind site plan approval throughout the Commonwealth is site plan approval can be used to regulate but not reject projects. Again, that presumes zoning compliance. 193 Central Ave, which Marion's very familiar with, is a zoning compliant use as a sort of childcare facility. So that was a project where we're talking about the physical layout and we're talking about the physical impacts of the project, but it's zoning compliant, you've got to approve it. This one is an interesting one, because it's kind of parallel with the Board of Appeals right now. It does need zoning variances, but we'll go through very quickly the conditions for approval for site plan approval, and then we can talk at a later hearing about how to apply those. And that's, I'll try to provide as much guidance as I can in the staff recommendation. But this is in the zoning bylaw under section 8D3, general conditions for approval. And I'll put this on the screen as well, just so folks can see it, and we all know what we're all talking about, because not everyone has the zoning memorized. Like, I can't even say that I do, because I still need to read it every single time. What you're looking for in a site plan approval, according to the bylaw, is protection of adjoining premises against detrimental or offensive uses on the site, convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site in relation to adjacent streets, property, or improvements, adequacy of the methods of disposal for sewage, refuse, and other waste resulting from the uses permitted or permissible on the site, and the methods of drainage for surface water, adequacy of space for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles, goods, products, materials, and equipment incidental to the normal operation of the establishment, proper use of the site with respect to unit density and proximity of adjacent buildings to each other, and finally, the adequacy of lighting to maintain a safe level of illumination on the site, and whether lighting is properly shielded to protect adjacent properties. The final thing I'll say, just to sort of think about these things, and again, I'll go back to sort of the principle of, we can use the 193 Central project as an example. We're not talking about whether this is an appropriate use for the site. The zoning tells us that it's an appropriate use for the site. So what are we actually looking at? We're looking at the physical impacts of the site. And really what site plan approval is meant to cover is the types of things on large, sort of out of the ordinary projects that the building code may not cover. The building code isn't talking about, on-site circulation, so you've got to help, figure that out. Similarly for things like landscaping and, sewage, refuse, and other waste, because this isn't a single-family house where you just put the trash out in the bucket. This is a large apartment building with a commercial use. There are different considerations for solid waste removal, for instance. So, you think about it as, what are the physical impacts of a larger project than what is usually sort of seen kind of around town, and that's what site plan review is. So we're going to wait a little bit in terms of the back and forth and hearing the questions that the board has. There are some questions that we have about the project. There's questions we want to know what questions you have, and kind of incorporate that into a revised staff recommendation, because we did do one for the previous project. It's a different project, less impactful in some ways, different in other ways. So we're going to provide you as much guidance as we can, but that's site plan review right now.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you.
Thank you. That's good. So moving forward, I know I have some questions and some concerns, but I'm going to hold off on any of my comments. I'd like to hear from the other board members. First, I don't know if anyone wants to speak up first on questions that you have. Rich, I see your hand up.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to mention, disclosure. So I am part of the East Milton Neighborhood Association's board. If folks remember, most won't, but when I started 5 years ago on this board, I was a member of that board, and at that time we were talking about a lot of things that were affecting East Milton, so I exited the board. This past year I did join that board again, but I've been not, anytime this subject comes up, I excuse myself from conversations, so I feel like I can be impartial during this public hearing.
Thank you, Rich.
So Meredith, I just have a question about how you want to go through this. Do you want to break it down by different topics, or do you want to just
that's a good
go
question.
through, go through the whole entire?
No, I think right now we'll keep it more general. I think what we'll do is I'll meet with Tim and I told Marion that we would probably put a calendar out. So we'll take, whether it's traffic, parking, we'll take things as they come. If there's something that jumps out at you right now that would be helpful to get ahead and maybe get some information, absolutely, we would welcome that. But I think at this time, really just some overall general direction for the developer and the team would be really what I think they're looking for, because some things may change. If one thing changes, it may affect something else. So, but we would like to have a calendar to keep this moving, on behalf of, for the developers. Give them a timeline so they know what staff to bring and who to bring it to which meeting. But this is a general, and of course, Sean is out of the country tonight. He's not here. He'll watch this so he can be part of the determining decision by the planning board. But certainly tonight, if there's things that we can get ahead of that we can have answered tonight, I would like to certainly let the board speak to questions or concerns they might have. So. All right, if that's helpful. Cheryl, you were taking some notes.
Yeah, I do have some notes. I went through the application in some detail to try and help us move this along. I do want to just make a couple of general comments at first. Yeah. East Milton Square has been subject to planning studies for actually decades. And it's been pretty consistent in the studies, to suggest looking at mixed use, in part because it's an amenity-rich area that's kind of underutilized in some ways. There's a lot of discussion about budgets and where our tax revenue comes from, and it mostly comes from residential tax revenue. A building like this is mostly residential, but it's commercial in many ways, and it has the ability to contribute to tax revenue comparable to commercial use as well. And so when we're looking at potential for overrides, I think we have to be mindful whether we can get more from our business districts. And I think this is a good example of sort of melding how to take something that's underutilized and sort of get it to higher performance, not just from a tax point of view, but from what the town needs point of view. There's lots of studies that say the town needs more housing and variety in the kinds of housing that we have. What you've said in your application is that you're going to target this towards young families or new households and maybe people like me who are empty nesters and don't have children at home anymore. And it's been shown in our studies, in our housing production plan, in our master plan, that we need that kind of housing. So I think there's some real benefits to what you're proposing on the site. And then when we get to the architectural approach to the site, I absolutely support the massing being shifted towards Granite Ave, that you're putting the bulk of the building away from the residential neighbors. And I also absolutely support that you're widening the sidewalks and providing a sidewalk. So getting our public realm improved in East Milton Square is another really beneficial thing. It might be one project at a time, unless we get some grant money for the rest of the neighborhood, but one project at a time is better than none. So it sets the direction for what other development might do. So having the street trees, having the brick, it starts to make it more like Milton Village, which I think a lot of people think is very attractive. So I think those are all positives. Now, I do have a few comments that I'd like you to look at and think about. If we could go to the site plan, Tim. One of them, I think, goes to the question I think that Meredith had earlier, which has to do with those parking spaces on Mechanic Street and the sidewalk. And just while you're getting there, I think also where the driveway comes in, if we can look at a different material, even if you have a curb that's not really curb height, but just maybe an inch, and maybe it's granite cobbles or something, so we can distinguish from the pedestrian from the drive part, because those cars that park there, some of them might end up, creeping onto that sidewalk, and I think it would be better to have a demarcation there. And the same thing along, because you have an interruption, a fairly long interruption really of the sidewalk there. Thanks for moving the transformer underground though, because that does help. But the other thing about it is the driveway at 16 feet. We may have talked about this before, but in our work in my office, I'm seeing the city of Boston want to get that down to 10 to 12 feet for multifamily buildings. And I think it's partly because they want to reduce that amount that's not sidewalk. So I'd like you to look at that and see whether you really think 16 feet's the right dimension that you need there. And then on the landscape, well, this is the plan, and the landscape plan is really the same. I think we just really I don't have a very good understanding of that north facade. We haven't seen a color version of that elevation. We don't know how the plantings are going to mask some of a blank wall, whether there's any texture to that wall. So I think I would like to see more, of what that's going to be like, and maybe a landscape plan that's actually calling out, specific locations, not just a green swath. Because it is going to be what you see there for a bit, and it's what that neighbor is definitely going to see. So that's one thing. And then on the street trees, I'm thinking that they're pretty close to the curb, and I'm wondering if they need some protection. Again, sort of a landscape detail kind of question, but we want those to do well. Right, and so urban.
I think there's a fence or a grid. I'm not sure where it is on this plan, but I know I've seen it because Stack recommended.
Okay.
Same thing.
Well,
yep. They said, well, first of all, because cars are opening their doors into the sidewalk space, that they can hit a tree, so that if you have a low
Tree guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be longer and it can be shorter. There's also some drainage absorption area around the trees. I think that's the change. And so I'll have to look at all the plans that we have and see where it is. So you don't really see it here. Here you just see that it's flat and the tree goes into the ground. But and this is much earlier rendering. So yes, I understand what you're talking about. I think that we may have tried to put that in, but it's not really clear when you look at these drawings.
Yeah, I think what you could do is just include typical detail for that. Like, it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be in the renderings, but if you have a typical detail. And you could put that with that sort of enhanced landscape plan. Now if we could go to the 3D or the elevations. There are a couple of things. The basis of design materials, I think, are good quality. They're appropriate for this building type, in my experience, as an architect doing multifamily work at this scale. So I think that's good. One of the things, though, I noted on those drawings and the elevations, it says that there's a deduct alternate for the windows from aluminum to PVC. Now, my understanding of aluminum windows and PVC windows is there's going to be performance difference, so there's also going to be aesthetic difference, potentially. So is that really your intention, is to keep a deduct? I see Ellen's waving her head no.
I would say it's not your standard PVC.
Ellen, can you come up with that?
So it's not your standard PVC window, Cheryl, that you're thinking about. It's something that's used in a lot of, thank you, Tony, in a lot of high energy saving buildings. We actually went with Michael to view one of them. They're super duper insulated windows, and one of our issues here is noise, and they're very good at keeping out noise, but we can show you a side-by-side comparison.
That's all, yeah, that would be great.
It's actually a great alternate to an aluminum window.
Yeah, just, how sometimes it can be rounded versus crisp edges, or there can be, sheen is different, texture, color, sight lines, dimensions. So if you could even just do, here's an elevation of a section with an aluminum, and here it is with PVC, just if the sight lines are all the same, because windows on a facade are usually one of the main characters of the facade. So changing a window, like if you look in a historic building, you change a window, from the details of that window to a different detail, it can change the whole building's look. So that I just think is important. And then you already hit on the storefront, so thanks, Tony, for picking up on that comment. Yeah. I notice a lot of penetrations in the facade you call vents. And if it's an all-electric building, you shouldn't have vents for much. So what are you venting with all those vents? There's lots of dots all over.
That's not really fully designed at this point. So, we would have standard venting for washer dryers.
So I would ask that you consider running the venting for the dryer vertically. And if it's all electric, I don't think you're going to need all those, but it's really important detail that we should understand. So if you're not going to have them, I'd rather really understand whether they're going to be there or not. Because all that beautiful brickwork, all that beautiful detailing, it can get destroyed by them, because they're all based on what it is in plan, and it might not look like what you want it to on the facade. Right, so that, and then just lastly, there's a bit of detail, there's a bit of blank wall on Mechanic Street at the ground floor where that brick is, where the service area is. And, you don't show much of that, how that detail is, like you do on the front facade where you have that little section. And I'd like to see a little kind of blow up of that, which shows some attention to that, because that's where your people are walking and they're going to see. And then if you could do something kind of blown up on the rear elevation, so we get a sense of what that combination of materials looks like too, because that's what neighbors are going to see from their side. And then, Tim, can you go to the first residential floor plan? Yeah, that's good. So that terrace, how deep is that terrace? 'Cause it looks like 18 or 20 feet. Is that, it was that first floor right there. There's not a dimension on it?
16 feet.
16. And the reason I asked, because that faces the neighbors. So an 18-foot deep terrace, you could have a party up there. And I'm a little concerned about how much activity is up there. And I'm even thinking that the unit type A and the unit type D on the ends, what if you didn't have terrace there and it was just for those two middle units and the terrace was smaller? And you'd have more green roof that way too. And that's just really consideration to noise for neighbors. And then one last comment for tonight anyway, at least I think one last, is the affordability. You have the 2 one-bedrooms, you only have 2 of them, and they're both of the affordables. And, you know, typically you're going to see affordables distributed throughout. And so, on the ground floor. Yeah, so I guess, you know, I would ask, I know these there's not a zoning requirement at the moment, there's no inclusionary zoning here, but to say that one of the least desirable units, which is the ground floor, and the 2 smallest units are your affordable units, you might consider giving one of those, swapping out one of those 1-beds on the upper floor to a 2-bed. And you've got one that's right next to it that's $987. So,
You mean to have 2 affordables next to each other?
no, I'm sorry, if you switched H to G, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's interesting on the ground floor because I didn't necessarily think of those as
I think
less
of,
desirable. I actually think the entrances to, you can see we haven't given you the design yet, but the thought is that the entrances will not be from the street, that one will be entered from the lobby, the other one will be entered from the side. I don't know if that makes any difference in how you think about it.
I was just thinking about it from the highway.
Very desirable unit up as an affordable unit, but maybe, you know, because it's on the ground level. So for some people, that's going to be attractive. They can walk right in, they don't have to go up. We have an elevator in this building, maybe it doesn't make any difference.
Well, if you think about like successful residential areas, you're going to have perhaps just a stoop, a little bit of green space, a little bit of change in elevation. Those are typically ground floor units that are pretty nice. But here you're right on the sidewalk, right next to parking spaces, right next to Grand Ave, right, which is an off-ramp on the highway than the highway. So to me, those aren't going to be as desirable as getting up a little higher, but maybe I'm wrong. And I'm happy to have other people comment on that as well. And maybe the Affordable Housing Trust can comment on it as well. So thanks. Those are sort of, in a way, kind of nitpicky. That's why I gave my general overall favorability to start with. But we're trying to keep this going. I wanted to give you all my feedback at once. Yeah.
Rich or Maggie, did you have something that you would like to ask or comment on at this time?
Yeah, Adam, Rich, do you want to go first? Or-
No, go for it.
So I want to thank you for your presentation. I'm one of the new members of the board, and so I can appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into your plan. I'm looking more not at the detail as Cheryl is. My concerns are bigger than Cheryl's. I'm a lifelong resident of Milton, and I agree that the square is ripe for redevelopment. And I'm really excited to see that there's some progress being made. But as we plan kind of for progress, I feel like we can't forget our past and our history. And I think East Milton Square is rooted in history, and a history that includes the residential neighborhoods. And the residential neighborhoods are comprised mostly of single-family houses. And we really need to remember and respect that history and respect the residents who still live in those residential houses, especially those on Mechanic and Pierce Street. I think, a successful project supports the integration of mixed use. I'm all for mixed use. I'm for residential space, commercial and civic spaces all kind of coming together, surrounding the neighborhood. And a successful project, I think, achieves a better place for the neighbors to live. And so my question is, when I look at a project, does this project accomplish this goal? Does this project make the existing neighbors, the existing residents, their neighborhood a better place for them to live? And if it makes it better for them, it will in effect make it better for the residents in your building. And so the other question is, how will this, how will the neighbors benefit from this project? The first step kind of for me is to look at the site as a whole. And like when I look at a project, I look to see what the plan is to reduce the impact of the project onto its abutters. And when I look at this plan, I'm not really getting a feeling that much is being done to minimize the impact of the building on its abutters and onto the neighbors. And I do think we've kind of forgotten, we just don't have the neighbors on Mechanic and Pierce, but we actually have neighbors on the other side of the expressway. So I know the expressway, cuts down the middle of East Milton, but we're still one town, and the neighbors on the other side, like State Street and Grafton, they're going to be looking at this too. So I think we really have to pay attention to all sides of the building. And I don't necessarily think that a 3-foot buffer or planting bed on the Mechanic side is sufficient. And it's not sufficient enough to reduce the impact of the building on its neighbors. So I do have a bit of issue of the size of the building. I don't want to get into all of my comments, but just generally speaking, I kind of want the applicants to know where I'm coming from. I've been in your position before when I went through a special permit for the town. And I think one of the most frustrating parts for me as an applicant was like going from meeting to meeting and not hearing the changes and feeling like you're wasting your time and your money. So I just wanted to kind of be upfront and honest with you with what I'm kind of feeling. I just think it's too big. I think the footprint is too big. There's not enough green space around it. I'm not sure if I've bought into the stacker system yet. I, spoke to a couple towns about the whole stacker system. And, the city of Quincy doesn't allow it. And they actually permitted 2 developments with stackers. And they've said to me, fortunately, they didn't actually get built. And they're not allowing them in the future for safety reasons. And my understanding is that the planning board, the zoning board, the fire chief, the planner kind of all came together and said that they had major safety issues and concerns with the stacker. So that's why they're not allowing it. And to me, like if a city of Quincy isn't allowing it, like why are we, Milton, a town, which I think a lot of people kind of forget about, we're still a town. We are not, and maybe we're a little bit more overbuilt than I would like to see, but we're still a town. And I haven't bought into the whole stacker idea. I don't think, like my questions with the stacker, is there enough interior space when you're going to remove a car? Do you have enough space for how many cars can get moved around at one time. There's going to be backlog of people. So I have specific questions about the stacker, but I don't think Milton as a whole should be looking at this stacker parking system as a solution. Because if we do it here at this site, then I think we're setting a precedent for another site. And then we're bringing more cars into an already tight East Milton Square, which is still, a neighborhood. It's still a neighborhood, and I think we keep forgetting that. And then lastly, a couple things. Lastly, the commercial space, I think as a business owner in town, it's really, really difficult to operate a business outside of this commercial district. I think we're doing a huge disservice to our residents if we are actually taking space that is as of right commercial space and making it housing. I think the whole first floor should be commercial space. I think we need our commercial spaces, according to Tim, the site plan approval you just went over. Our commercial spaces and our residential spaces need to provide off-street loading and unloading of vehicles. And I don't think that there's any space right now as this is designed to offer that. So I'd like to see on-site loading. And then my other overall is the building design. I appreciate all the efforts in creating a new look for Milton, but I don't think it quite fits in. The East Milton neighborhood is designated as a historic railway village, and I would love to see like a modern take paying tribute to that that designation. Everyone involved in this project, between the property owner of Paul Dravers and Ellen and Michael, you guys all live in Milton and you guys all live in New England style houses. So I kind of am a little bit confused that this design of this building is so out of character of Milton. And we really need to have a building that represents our character as a whole. And I don't think this building is quite it. And like one of the things I think about is if you're driving up 93 on the expressway heading into Boston, when you look up and you look up on Granite Ave, you see all the buildings. And yes, they're not super attractive all right now, but they're ripe for redevelopment. And I just think that shouldn't be forgotten, that whole Granite Ave. We say, oh, it's just Granite Ave. It's, it's not the nicest part of Milton. It's, but we're right on the highway. But that's really the face of Milton. And I think we need something that looks more like the rest of Milton. So that's kind of my overall thought of the project. And I really think, it could be a great project. I'm in support of a great project, but I just think it's not quite there. Thanks.
Thank you, Maggie. Rich?
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yeah,
go next?
thanks. Sure. Yeah. No, I'm not going to take a lot of time because I'm interested in hearing more and going through the process, and I'm definitely going to have thoughts and opinions as we move forward. I am interested in hearing the rest of it. Interested in hearing what the public has to say at those appropriate times. I'll say it's it looks very different than what was brought before. So we're going in the right direction. I just, a couple of these are so benign, I don't think we need to answer them right now, but I'll just make a comment. I thought you had a lot of great ideas and great thoughts, especially on those balconies, things like that. When you were looking at the trees, just a comment, I couldn't really tell, and I know it was just a picture, so I'd have to actually look at the drawings, but I'm hoping it's not, that pad, those foam things, those deteriorate pretty bad, and they usually, to me, they look like they're kind of like a hazard you trip over them. So I'm kind of hoping they're those, we're thinking those iron things that sit down in there and they don't move. They're a little better looking. The other comment, and I'm not an architect, so I'm just thinking purely, aesthetics of the rest of that street. There's a lot of brickwork, so I like that you are incorporating brick, but there's a lot of like red brick on the street. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean you normally do red, or does that mean you start changing and updating it with the times? I don't have an opinion on that, but I'm sure others will, and it'd be interesting to hear at some point like how you chose the color, because there is a lot of stone on that street, a lot of brick already, and again, not an architect, so I don't know if does that mean you stick with one color, or do you change it, or does the change fit in when you're going down the road? So these are just initial things when I was hearing you folks talk. So, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Great, thank you, Rich. And so I'll go just be real brief as well on my comments. I have to be completely honest that this is a commercially zoned district currently, and what I've seen is we've lost the commercial and the commercial space within the building. We started, again, this was a different project, but it was three commercial spaces. We're down to one on a over 20,000 square foot lot. We're only getting 1,500 square feet. And I think that's going to be an issue for our town, not me personally, but what I hear from the residents are the limited amount of commercial space that we have in our town and that we need more. Everyone is just saying, where can we get some more commercial space? And I feel that it would be a real loss of an opportunity to not have those 3 units on the first floor, and really bring back what is to revitalize and really make it a true mixed use. It's no longer really mixed use and that's happened with Falcone, unfortunately. That is a significant loss of commercial space, so we've lost, and we're having an erosion of that space. So I would love to see that, and also for uniformity and aesthetically, I think one of the most attractive things about your building is that you do have that glass front on the, depicted on your original plan, where you're not going to have a flat wall or, just have, I'm sure you'll do windows, but it really gives it a nice look. It gives it a nice base. I really appreciate the fact that you have brought that down a story. It makes a tremendous amount of difference. The 3 stories and 4 on the granite. So I really do appreciate that, but I would like to see that the commercial brought back, because I think our town expects our commercial spaces, and it is so limited along that area specifically. It's such a narrow space that we do have our commercial. So to be able to retain that at minimum, I think would be expected by the residents. The other thing, it's still, even though you've brought it down for 4 stories, it's still a really, really very large building in comparison to a lot of the 1- and 2-story commercial buildings that we have currently. I know I've addressed this previously, but and I really do appreciate the architecture and the art of what you've designed. I in no way want to take anything away from the design of the building, but what the current design, really taking off of a brutalist style of architecture, really gives a cold facade. It's not a welcoming building. It's an art, and I get that, and it's a look, and I think that if it stood alone. But this building does not stand alone. It's going to be part of what we're working on, and we're about to create do some overlay zoning with some design guidelines to really create East Milton to have a distinct character. And I think that's, we want to create that, where we are creating a more uniform, connected community where there is a distinct character. When you come in, and a warm, welcoming, and a lot of what you're doing with the sidewalks is wonderful, and making it much more appealing. But I think what you and this goes to the density, the way to mitigate being such a large building, and again, I think it can connect to some of the smaller buildings, is a different, taking a different view architecturally on it, where you are breaking up, and you've done it vertically. You've articulated that on some verticals, but again, you have some real tall, flat facades. If you could create some horizontal, and you've done that with the base, but I'm thinking with you could do that with materials, whether you made the base, maybe have some limestone, maybe the southwest corner, which is that sort of that angled, that if that could be a limestone or simulated limestone, they make some really wonderful, if you had that with a limestone and you had a significant, either the top story being having sort of that a limestone with a cornice across the top, you horizontally would be breaking that. That would leave, what I would really like to see is the two middle floors being a red brick, and have the windows have a little bit more of a classic style. That way your interior spaces actually wouldn't have that necessarily, that little crotched into that V into their units, which actually would make it a more symmetrical unit, maybe more glass, more windows. But if you could break the massing horizontally and really give it a base, and we talked about this a lot when we were doing the design guidelines with the Milton Village, that giving it a little more of a classic element, even though it could be a modern building, giving it a base, a middle, and a cap would really mitigate the size and the scale, even though it's giving you your units, it's giving you the size and not taking anything away from that, but softening your lines and making it, as we go and we do our design guidelines, something that takes off the elements of some of our, whether it's the Admiral's building or, the building, the Abbey Park, even the fire station has, limestone, sort of lentil, is it lentil? Lentils, but having some detail framing the windows with a different, with maybe a limestone type material would really give it, I think, some of the classic elements that I think people would really gravitate to and really say, gosh, we drive into Milton, and isn't that a beautiful building and it's a welcoming building rather than that's a wow, but is it a wow that creates a sense of community? And I think the residents of East Milton very much would like to see an identity and a connection, and I think you could do that in a really nice way and mitigate the height and the size and the scale with some more, and you can still do the vertical, you could do some things vertically, but more of a horizontal and with materials. I think you would be very, very successful. And just the other thing, I think what that does, this building, there's not a transitional building behind you and the neighbors. And I know that's been, I think we're all very concerned about that. This is the transition to that neighborhood. It goes from your commercial building right into that neighborhood. And that's a complicated thing to create. I understand, makes your job, a little bit more challenging because, and you've done that nicely with the step down. But I think softening some of the lines and not making it, although, again, nothing to take away from the art of the architecture and what you've designed. It's the style, not your design, but that would be more consistent with and more of a nice transition to those residential neighborhoods, which are really classic New England buildings, and what people consider to be in our master plan a bucolic town with a small town feel. So that's, and we want to work with you. I just want to say we really want. I want to see you have a really successful project, and really, in any working together, I think we can accomplish that. So That's all.
I just want to ask you one question.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
It's very interesting, to get these comments. To go back to that first question of commercial space, it's
Yeah.
been a real problem.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we designed it, I didn't design it, but the design that was proposed
Right.
initially was first floor commercial, residential above, with
Right.
more units.
Right.
And the problem, as you know, is parking. And the problem throughout East Milton Square is parking. And the neighbors have pointed out that the problem is parking.
Right.
There is no parking lot next door. There's a bank. It's all privately owned all around there.
Have
and
you approached
so-
them at all? That was a question I actually meant to ask. Have you spoken to Citizens Bank about commercially, whether
They don't own it.
they don't own the parking lot?
I've looked up the deed. It doesn't seem to be to Citizens Bank.
No, it's not.
It's not. So, oh,
They
okay.
just lease it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
entire
it's a good
site?
question, of course, but,
Yeah.
we've looked
Well-
into it a little bit, but.
Yeah.
But
So I understand that.
I'm
Yeah.
just putting it out there.
I do understand.
So one thing-
The zoning bylaw does not allow us to create that much commercial space
Right.
without parking.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem you're gonna find with all of these individually owned
Mm-hmm.
spaces.
Was I was
in the
about
East
to
Milton
get to.
Business District is going to be sort of the same kind of problem. No
Understandable.
existing parking or almost none, and so everyone's relying on street parking and whatever parking
Mm-hmm.
areas there are. But if you're going to if this were to be an all-commercial building, and I wouldn't think that we would be proposing automated enclosed parking in a commercial building, because you need to be familiar with the system and carefully control it. That works in condominium, but it doesn't work, with commercial building. You'd have to do all ground floor parking, basically. I mean, I've talked to the building commissioner about this, and I know you're looking at design guidelines. So this is definitely going to be an issue in terms of planning and designing for the whole of East Milton Business District. The idea, and I'm not going to respond to any of the design comments. They're very interesting. I think they're for the architects
Right.
and the owner
Certainly.
and the developers to go back and discuss. But from my perspective, this is a very difficult site because of the proximity of the expressway, the fact that we are not next to the deck. I mean, everybody maligns the deck park, but the deck park does muffle noise. And it certainly adds a softer feel despite the intrusion of the Southeast Expressway. But when you get this far down, this building at the end, particularly the business district, is all expressway. I mean, when you stand in front of it, the noise is intense. It's not an attractive site to try to figure out how to do anything, basically. And so, so I'm happy to hear you say that, certain size and density may be necessary in order to do some kind of development. That's encouraging. I don't know right now what the solution is to providing more commercial space on the ground floor, simply because it's going to be a Board of Appeals issue. And our zoning, our zoning would require us to create, for what we had proposed before, 4,100 square feet, a lot of parking spaces. I think it was 21 or something like that. I mean, it's not feasible. And in order to build a building, where are you going to put the parking? That you're right next to, so it's not just because of the expressway, though, that this site is so difficult. The lot is a triangular shape, and it borders a residential district, as you pointed out, but it's in the business district.
Right.
So how do you make good use of a site like that? And then, of course, we're all very interested in what happens as you develop zoning guidelines and hopefully some overlay zoning for East Milton Square. It's going to take a while. What you have now is a situation where you have land that's available, a developer who's interested in doing something. I agree with you. I think the town should try to capitalize on that situation and come up with a good development, and maybe it can be, an expression of something that will help you with your other design work. There are a lot of different opinions about design, unfortunately, and there are many or some who feel they really like, this look, or they're used to it, or they're not uncomfortable with it. So my basic question back to the board, this is to the planning board, is how do you solve the problem of parking if you want more commercial space? And whatever the size of this building would be, how do you solve that problem? it's quite difficult for an individual landowner to figure it out. What's happening is we're going to the Board of Appeals for different projects, restaurants that are proposed and that kind of thing, and you're asking for some give and take. I mean, you're saying, well, we can't exactly do it the way the bylaw says we have to do it, but we're going to leave some space here, we're going to use some street parking, we're going to have some off-street parking, and that's accepted, because after all, most of the businesses in East Milton Square don't have any off-street parking. So I just would certainly be interested in hearing your thoughts. Most likely the Board of Appeals would be interested in hearing your thoughts on that particular issue. So, and then I don't know what the financial pro forma looks like for this building if you do take 2 more residential units away and instead create commercial. That's something for the developer to talk about and as architects and engineers. We'll have a lot to think about and come back to you to talk about. And I know you want to go to public comment. I do want to, before we end the meeting, I hope, talk about what we will, in addition to the comments you've given us tonight, a particular topic such as traffic and parking perhaps might be appropriate for the next meeting. A lot of the engineering of this building has already been reviewed. And don't think that in particular requires a great deal of discussion. We could probably address that also at the same meeting. It's been peer reviewed already. It's been reviewed by the town. And the same engineering applies to the building that's shorter and has fewer units.
Certainly, yeah.
So I'm just thinking that, well, so I'll end there, but.
Right.
I'd be
Once
happy
we
to
get
hear
these, I think big picture items addressed, and certainly we want to work with you, with parking, because it's an issue, it's a concern for East Milton residents, and I look, what has recently been built, in East Milton, whether it's the Elliott Physical Therapy building, which was a recent really, it's funny, I recently have been using Elliott Physical Therapy, and I see everyone in Milton there. It's like, it's such a wonderful thing that we have in our community. It's a great business. It does have residential units up above, very limited parking as well, and a really difficult site there. But that was a successful project working with our town, not on the scale of density that obviously that we're looking at here. But let's try to work together on, I think if we could bring that commercial base, because before anything else, it's commercially zoned, and I think we need to retain our commercial
Well, we
base.
aren't reducing it. I just want to point that out. But I mean, that would be a minimum. I agree entirely with that. To take away what's already there.
To only have 1,500 square feet out of 20,000.
So that, may I?
Yeah,
So that's my
yeah.
question is, do you have, how many square feet of commercial space in the current buildings? And how many parking spaces you have? Because those businesses survive, I suppose. You call it survive or thrive, I don't know which, but based on what they have currently. So if they have the same number of spaces, I mean, one could argue that you could have the same amount of commercial space with the same number of spaces in a different configuration.
That was our original argument.
Right.
We presented that last year, and you didn't reject it necessarily. I have to say this, from the planning board standpoint, we just didn't get to the end, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But my thinking on that was pretty much what you're saying. There's really maybe three off-street parking spaces, which are they're really with the florist. There isn't really any parking.
And then, and some conversation with the business owners, like the kitchen shop, that business has been there for some time. Where do people park when they come there? Exactly. So if it works now, will it work when you redevelop it? That's the data that could help the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, I think. And as far as like the overall planning, the last plan that we had done in East Milton Square, I identified the parking challenge of small sites, because it's hard to meet the needs of the parking on a small site because parking takes up the space. That's one of the advantages of the stacker system. I've seen that stacker system, the one that, and I think Maggie, if you and Sean and whoever else hasn't seen it, take advantage of the opportunity to go see it. because it's quite impressive. And it's being used in other places. It might not be in Quincy at the moment, but it is being used and in many places. And so I think one of the advantages is when you have a small site, how many ways can you solve the problem, right? So that is one of the ways you can solve it. Another way is to have, municipal parking. I was recently in Attleboro and looking where they have a commuter rail station. They're building a lot of multifamily housing there, and some of it mixed use. And they're solving the parking situation or requirements by municipal garages and requiring the developers to utilize the municipal garage for their buildings. And so I don't know exactly the financial way that that's working, but a conversation about that is something Milton might need to talk to other communities to see how they're doing it, because they're unlocking the potential that if they're downtown that they didn't do before. And that's kind of like what Milton needs to think about doing as well. And it might make more economic sense for other developers. It might be too late for this project, but it might be a way so that you don't have to build as much, because you're accommodating your parking in a more efficient way someplace else. So I just would like to make a request of Tim, when he's looking at the staff report, I didn't see, we do not have design guidelines for East Milton Square. I do not see anything in the site approval criteria where we talk about what the architecture is. And we've done it on others. We've tried to kind of push it where it is, but I think we need some legal advice about our standing. What kind of ground are we standing on with that? Because I don't want to be, pushing something that we're not on sound footing legally on. And I'm not saying that anybody has, but I'd like some criteria on that, because East Milton has been. It'll eventually catch up and have design guidelines. We're in the works on it. But Milton Village, just one last thing, Meredith, if I may. It was a little bit easier to do the design guidelines in some ways because the architectural character is so there. It's either the small buildings on High Street kind of wood frame character, or it's the brick buildings on Adams Street kind of character. But East Milton Square, I don't see architecturally as having the same kind of continuity. And so the design guidelines, I think, are going to be interesting to develop and then to actually be able to follow. So when the architects get the design guidelines and have to see how they're going to design a building to meet the guidelines, what are they looking at? What's the source of building that's nearby in East Milton Square that's going to drive the guidelines? So it'll be, I don't see it as being quite as easy as Milton Village is what I'm saying.
Right. And I think my addressing the architecture is in order to mitigate the density that is not zoned for, that is incredibly, one would say overly dense, but this is a way to achieve that. I think, and I've sent Tim some examples. I think a while ago I had sent you some examples of way buildings can be large, but they don't feel large. They don't feel cold and not welcoming. They feel like part of a neighborhood, and so it's a way of lessening the impact of a really large building, and that addresses and density. And I think that's the way I'm looking at it. So, all right, good. So I think we should move on and listen if there's anyone from the public who would like to speak to this.
So John David Corey has his hand up. John, I'm going to let you talk on the panel. If you could give us your name and address for the record.
John David Corey, 1452 Canton Avenue. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes,
we can hear you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hall, for taking some public comment. I know it's late. I won't be hopefully too long. But I think the board's comments about the project have been pretty close to where I would be on the project. It's there's no question the developer really is going to have to thread the needle with this, because the project is just obviously too big for this site. So they're going to have to really work with the massing and try to get this down even further for the context. I'd like to just talk quickly about the site plan. The site plan originally was a series of lots, smaller lots, and now we're combining them for one large project. And from my experience, I have advanced degrees from MIT in planning and design. And when you combine these lots like this, you're creating this mega block. And I know a mega block might sound, but it's the idea of that combining the lots, and you're creating a massive problem because of this, because then the footprint is becoming too large for the surrounding neighborhood. So I think you really need to look at the site in a way where you are breaking the massing into at least two pieces. If you look at the facade that you've designed, you've actually tried to do it in a tripartite design. So you're sort of hinting that you're making it into three structures, but it's not working. You really need to have really clear differentiations between the parts. The site plan as well, I'll continue on that because that's really the purview of the board, I believe. But we have a site plan with a building that is it's becoming a mushroom. We have a 3-foot cantilever around basically on all sides of this thing, especially over the sidewalks. And then we're saying we have problems with the trees because the trees have to fit in there. So now we pick these crabapple trees that the stack group is advocated for. But the fact is that the 3-foot cantilever, I believe, is causing the problem. The building, in my opinion, should be pulled back to the property line, come down to the ground, be supported as a classical building would be. Chair Hall mentioned sort of like a rusticated base, which the building would sit on, not just a wall of glass. That might also help if you're doing residential on the first floor. It should really look like residential on the first floor, not a converted storefront. And you might be able to market them better because that's a busy area as well. Getting back to the trees, you could do American hornbeam trees. You could do Princeton elms in there, a little bit more of a vertical tree. I think that these ornamental trees are just not going to work in this location. They have pretty flowers. You can put them around elsewhere, like little decorations, but I think people need a canopy. The screening in the northeast corner, these arborvitaes don't do anything for the neighborhood. I think that's a problem. I think you really need to scale the building down, give some more green space, and then we can find some room for some trees here. Those are general comments on the site plan. I will weigh in on the material list. You guys have really, it's mainly a residential project. And it's a cold location. We have the ramp, we know the spot. And then we go ahead and pick a palette of medium grays, dark grays, light grays, blacks. We need to open it up and warm up the project, and I think you'll have a much better reaction from the residents in the area, as well as potential sales or leasing in the future. You have a linear brick design. I think that actually is probably one of your most successful elements of the facade. The linear bricks are slightly odd in my book because you would never build with a linear brick like that because it would break. So to me, it looks like it's just scratched on the surface. I probably would do a slightly more traditional shape of the brick, a taller, fatter brick, which would actually stack and look like it goes someplace. There were mentions about warmer bricks, yellows or reds or things of that sort I think would work well. Those are the materials, the fiber cement, all that business, I would get rid of it. I would lose it all. You had a brick detailing precedent image, which I think was actually quite handsome. It had some rustications around the windows. It had some lentil details. I thought that was pretty good. It actually incorporates some balconies, which you're showing glass balconies, which I don't see anything in the district with that glass. So I think that's not a good design. If you look around at the houses in the area, most of them look like they're like 1880, Greek Revival, 1860 type of stuff. Clapboards, they have some of them have mansard roofs, they have dormers. Perhaps you could work the metal roof into the system and maybe make the top floor true mansard. I think that would be handsome. Because again, you're sort of stepping back the building from the neighborhood, but then you're going forward at 3 feet over the sidewalk, and then you're coming back 6 feet, so you're only really trading 3. Maybe if you went straight up and did a nice mansard roof, that could be handsome. Lighting, I think I think when the redesign changes, I think the lighting will change. I won't get involved in that. We talked about the apple trees, certainly some American hornbeams will work well there. And then the last thing I would say is the corner piece as you're coming down Granite Ave. I guess you'd be coming north. The corner of the building, I think should be anchored where you have the florist now. I think that should be the gateway. I think the massing should be on the corner, and then it probably should step back from that point. I think it'd be much more handsome, and I think you would get a lot of photo ops, and you would really see that building as a beacon as you come in and create a place. I think that'd be very helpful, and give it a name and that type of stuff. So hopefully the comments are helpful, and good luck with it. I do think you have a team that can do it. I've gone to the website of your architecture team, and I've seen some projects that you did like on East Broadway, and I think there's some hope on the project. So thank you for taking my comments, Chair Hall.
Thank you, John David. Okay. And do we have anyone else from the public who would like to speak at this time?
I'm not seeing anyone right now. If there's anyone else on Zoom or in the room that wants to speak, you can use the raise hand function or raise your hand if you're a real person. Not that you're not real people at home. I don't know.
Yeah. Feel free to raise your hand if you would. Or certainly feel free to email comments in if somebody has something to add that they don't want to speak.
We've got Andrew D'Amato has his hand up. Andrew, I'm going to allow you to talk. If you can give us your name and address for the record.
Sure. It's Andy D'Amato, 26 Pierce Street. I'm also a member of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. And I just want to reiterate that previous caller, hit on some points that I thought were really well. If we could make that brick look more like traditional brick, and both in size and shape as well as color, I think that would go a long way with changing the whole look of that building, which just looks like an ink block building. Now, certainly, the guys mentioned that East Milton Square doesn't have quite the charm as the Village, and I agree with that. We don't have beautiful old mill buildings and a waterway running through it, but we certainly don't have anything that looks like this building. So to set the standard for what the East Milton neighborhood's going to look like wouldn't be this building. I think we really have to try to make this with more traditional style building materials, whether it's fake brick that looks like real brick, if it's fake clapboards that look like real clapboards, something along those natures, because most of the comments we're getting from the neighborhood association, and they're numerous, is that they just don't like the way this thing looks, and it doesn't feel like home. And that's really unfortunate, because most of the people I'm talking to have lived here a long time. And it is sort of, without getting corny, it's kind of heartbreaking to hear someone who's lived in the neighborhood for so many years say, this building is not making me feel like home. It's not making me feel like this is my town, Milton, which, they love. So I would just implore the developers to sort of think about that a little bit and see if they could come up with something a little less modern. In Maggie's comment about a modern interpretation of classical building style, something along those lines, I really think it would go a long way to persuading some people that this is a better project. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, very much. Anyone else from the public you've seen?
Nope.
Other hands at this time.
Can I just make a suggestion about what we were going to group together next in terms of topics?
Would that be helpful, Marion, if we went through sort of how we will go for next?
And I just wanted to say that I agree with Marion when she said that we had peer review on stormwater and traffic, and if we all can just read through through those, I think.
Yeah, and I'll get a reconfirmation from the town engineer. We'll get you a fresh
Yeah.
letter from her. I don't think that there'll be any additional
Because
comment from them,
stormwater,
but-
I don't
Yeah.
think any of us feel like we have the expertise,
Yeah.
so we rely on the peer review and the engineering
Certainly,
department.
and we can begin this. I do feel like we need to take a pause and just
No, I'm just
give the
saying what,
developer, yeah.
I'm just
yeah,
saying, I'd like,
yep.
because I don't think those will take a lot of time, I'd like to cover
Right.
everything. So like traffic, stormwater, the operations and maintenance plan, and the
Certainly.
construction management plan, all in one meeting, because
Okay.
I think we can do it, is what I'm going to suggest. And I just have them here, just a few notes, but it's
Okay.
like, I
But I
don't
do
think
wanna-
it'll take as much time as
Right.
this kind of, the architecture and the site plan is all I'm saying. So,
Well,
I d-
yeah, I don't think engineering would change. I'm not sure. Traffic,
But-
if we're looking at parking
Yeah.
though, I feel like that's sort of, the elephant in the room. The parking, I mean, commercial space and parking it, that's, and the design to mitigate the massing. I think those are our three things. So I don't know if I'm ready to schedule anything quite yet, but I do agree that we could probably get to at least a couple of those to address. But-
Yeah, because I think it would be helpful if people could see the parking stacking system if they haven't and they want to see it,
Certainly, that's
to
what we
get
wanna
ready
give
for that.
time for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then the other thing is I have a lot of questions about the construction management plan, so I want to, I don't have to go over them tonight because obviously, but I want to allow them to be able to respond to the questions. So I would like to see.
Would
at
you like
least-
to send some questions to Tim that he could forward to
Can
Marion?
if you can give me 1 minute, I'll just ask them to
Oh, sure.
supply.
Yep,
Okay, can you address where construction workers will park? Where a job trailer would be located? Where dumpsters would be located? I didn't see it on the plan. Address the demolition phase and what the construction hours and dust control would be for that phase. Address delivery hours and how you can schedule that to be off-peak hours, of traffic peak hours. And then the truck routing plan doesn't actually show any routes, so actually add the routes to that, how the trucks would go. So
Great.
if you could supply that, that would be great.
That's great.
I think I
Okay.
have it.
Okay, great.
And if you don't, I can send it to you.
So, I mean,
And-
the general, there's some pretty major issues that,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not easy to solve. I
Right.
get the comments that I
Yeah.
hear the comments that, and I think I understand. I don't know how easy they are to resolve, or even if some of them can be, given the financial constraints and everything else. So, I mean.
Right.
But, we're ready, I mean, we would be ready probably to address those, what I call sort of support studies at any time that you want to do that. I don't know, I mean, we can start discussing design, and we can try to discuss it a little more. Maybe
That would
2
be
weeks from
great.
now,
I
but
think,
we're
yeah.
probably going to, it just depends on how extensively we are interested in doing any design changes. We're going to have to go back and talk about all of this.
Right, I want
and
to
see
give
what we can
the
do.
opportunity and, yeah.
So you have your next meeting on the 23rd. Were you thinking of continuing this hearing to that date?
Well, obviously, we'll pick a date, and we need to select a date. What are your thoughts? Do you think that's enough time for you to really be able to take a pause and be able to address?
Not everybody can be at that meeting at the 23rd. That's not an issue for us.
What
do you
about
wanna do?
dealing with the low-hanging fruit, the stuff, the engineering,
Yeah.
at the next meeting, and give us some more time to review some of the design and other bigger items?
That would
4
be,
weeks out.
right. I think that would be, yes. I think that would, why don't we put it down for the 23rd, and if you're not ready, we could,
Well, in terms of the engineering and this CMP
Yeah.
and the traffic, I mean, all that information is there. We could have done that tonight if that's what was on the agenda, but I think we could easily be prepared for that in 2 weeks.
That
okay.
might make sense. I mean, I know it doesn't get to the heart of some of the comments we've
Right.
talked about, but those might
Okay.
need more time anyway. We may come back and say to you, we can't do some of these things. I mean, I don't know. We're going to have to go back
Right.
and talk about it. But we already have the other material. It's already been developed. We have the studies. that's the opportunity to discuss and to add, to answer the questions you already gave us. If you think of any other questions based on existing materials that we're going to review on the 23rd, please do send them to Tim, and we'll see whether we can assemble that. And all of these materials are posted on the website, so everyone, if you are so inclined, you could read the stormwater report, engineering report, the long-term maintenance plan, you could read the traffic report, and all the updates to the traffic report. And I would say the same thing. If there's a particular question that comes up relating to all of that, if you send it to the town planner, I'm sure he will send it to me. I will distribute it to this development group. So that way we can be as prepared as possible just to get through those topics at the next meeting.
Okay.
So, Mr. D'Amato has his hand up again. I don't know if you want to take.
Certainly, yes, we'll welcome.
Andy, I don't know if these are new comments or.
It is a new comment. I was wondering if the developer would be able to provide the East Milton Neighborhood Association with a set of plans so that we could review it with some of our neighbors, and rather than trying to take them off the web, which is not.
A copy of the extra
You
plans.
want a copy of the architectural plan?
With elevations.
I think there is an extra in our office, which, Rich, unless you wanted that, there is an extra copy.
The board is allowed to welcome my copy. I like digital, Andy. Save the trees, easy. I have a massive monitor, so it's easier. And
It's tough on the.
Rich, would you be able to pick that up from the planning department's office and deliver it to Emna?
I can pick it up from you too.
Somebody,
We'll connect.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. All right. So, with that, let's
Want to continue to the 23rd
to
at
the 20
7:10?
to 7:10 on the 23rd.
So moved.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Don't we need a vote on that?
Do we need to vote on continuing the hearing? I
I
think.
thought we did, but
If it's open.
I could be wrong. We
close
did
it.
in the past.
I think we need to vote to close it.
Rich, we've done it in the past, right? But I don't,
We usually do.
All right.
Well, let's make it official, and because we didn't do it for the Scenic Road hearing, so let's.
Vote that to yes. All right.
Seconded.
Second, Rich.
Yep.
All right. Well, Maggie,
Yes.
Cheryl,
yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
And you'll want to take a vote to
We'll-
continue the
and
Scenic
we'll
Road
just
hearing to
for
7:05.
For formality, to
Yeah.
7:05. The formality of just making a motion to continue, as we discussed earlier, the 1200 Brush Hill Road. We will also be moving that to the 23rd. If I could, at 7:05. If I could have a roll call on that. Rich?
Did
First, you need
we?
a motion and a second.
You gotta make
right?
the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Yep, sorry. Go
Second.
ahead, second?
Yep.
Okay, and Maggie,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
All right,
Great,
nice
so
and
we're just
tidy.
covered. Yep. All right, thank you.
Mayor, just one
Yeah,
question. In
sorry.
relation to the parking, I think for Maggie and Sean, it would be very beneficial for them to see that. So
Yeah, I think so.
we'll be happy to do
That would be great. Sean's out of the country right now. I think he's in Ireland, actually. So, he's,
We'll get them together, and we'll try to find a time.
when
and
he's
a
back, I'm sure they would like to take a look.
time and a
That's
date
good.
for that.
Thank you.
Good. And any information you have on Quincy and why they're not allowing it would be helpful.
So I actually do have some information on that. One of the projects that was approved was a project of ours, and
Yeah.
it's not the same system at all. The system is a two-stacker system where one car drives in, that car has to come out, and it lowers down, and another car drives on top of it. This was a rental building, and we decided not to install it because we didn't think that transient users would be able to use the system. It's not the system that's being used in Boston. It's not the system we're proposing. So
Good. Well, we'll follow up with more information on that.
And
but
I know the folks over in Quincy. I can give them a
all right,
buzz
that's
and
great.
see if I can get
Thank
them.
you all so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Good night. All right. So, all right. So moving to our next item of business, now we have our to our East Milton zoning request for proposals, which I think Sean's away. I think it's very dense material, so we're not going to go through all the criteria tonight. I hope folks will continue to review that material, so we can have a good, healthy discussion on that on the 23rd as well. But we did you wanted to talk about some logistics on that, just so we.
Yeah, I think there's two kind of things that we need to kind of figure out in advance of an evaluation of the evaluation criteria. And if anyone has any questions about the email that I sent articulating the process that we have to go through, we can talk about it now, or you can email me or give me a call. It's very important that you write everything down and you come up with sort of a written articulation of kind of why you're making the ratings that you're making. All of that is spelled out in the Chapter 30B guide that I sent around. So it's not light reading, but it's not the heaviest stuff out there either. So hopefully, we all can kind of figure it out together. The two things that I want to talk about are reference checks and whether we want to bring these firms in for interviews. I'll start with interviews first. The style of procurement that we did, there are other methods that we could have used to sort of, you have the option of like shortlisting respondents. So, you go through the criteria and, there are two that are highly advantageous and two that are not advantageous. You can shortlist those first two and kind of bring them in. That option is not available to us. So if we decide that we want to bring firms in for interviews, we got to bring 4 firms in for interviews. And so everyone kind of gets the same opportunity to be questioned in the same way. And then sort of that becomes itself another selection criteria. So we don't necessarily have to decide tonight, but I think we should all be thinking about, as you're doing this review, do we want to bring these firms in for an interview and talk to them kind of one-on-one? If that's going to be the case, I would advise a special session for that, just because it would take a little bit of time.
So can I just make a comment
Yeah.
about that? If we see one firm that stands out above the others, then that might, help guide us to whether we think, we want to interview, right?
Right.
So I'm just trying to think how we keep it moving. Like, do you want to get a sense from any of us that, like, if there's only one firm that might be highly advantageous at the bottom line or not?
I think that
If we all agree
Yeah.
that there's one firm that we feel like this fits the needs for East Milton.
Yeah, I'm just worried that interviewing might take, by the time you get everybody
I agree.
scheduled, it's going to be like
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
so.
If
I
we have
think
consensus, we
I
might
mean,
not need
what
to.
I'll say is this, without asking people how much homework they've done so far, when do you think that you would have sort of digested all 4 proposals and be able to sort of make that judgment? Because I think, we can probably, as a sort of scheduling matter, we can kind of schedule that or not schedule it.
I think by the next meeting, I've already read through them.
Yeah.
I'm just, going through it again with the criteria in mind. And
Yeah, like I have a first impression and I have a ranking in my mind, but I want to go back and look through
Same.
and just, like you said, apply the criteria, so like to follow your process. But in my mind, I don't see them all at the same level, just from my first pass. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and so I think the way that I would think about it is, the interviews. So, and we'll talk about reference checks in a minute. The interviews kind of serve as, I don't want to say tiebreaker, but like if everyone was bunched together, you sort of need to kind of figure out how to shake them out.
Right.
And the interview can sort of, if you're already seeing something where it's like, there's no way that this firm catches up, no matter what they do. Then maybe you say, all right, well, we can sort of use what's on paper. Ultimately, it's up to you all to make that judgment.
The problem is it's either all or nothing, right? So in my mind, it's either one stands out or you interview them all.
Well, and so I think that's why, it's tough decisions, but I think, the selection criteria kind of, if you can apply, good judgment to it, you'll have, the decision gets made for you in a way if you sort of add everything up. The thing about reference checks is we should check references. How do you want to do it? Do you want to, I know there's 5 members, but there's 4 here, and there's 4 firms. I don't know.
A lot of them provided references within their.
So I mean, like,
their
what we've done in
portfolios.
the past is, you don't necessarily have to call every single reference,
check,
but depending on how much, you want to do, you pick 1 or 2, and give them a call. If everything's consistent, great. If you get 2 wildly out of left field evaluations, maybe you call a third. But it just becomes a matter of how do you want to divvy up that work, in terms of, who does that. I'm happy to make a few calls, but I don't want to make 8 calls.
Right. And I also found it just very helpful for others, if they have time, to look at the websites for some of these firms, because I think there's a lot that's nuanced in some of these, the RFPs, and there's things that are stated quite clearly. But it's also helpful to look at some of the culture, you might say, of on top of what they've been giving us, which is in answer to what we've asked for, but it gives you a sense of the experience that I feel that we would be getting, and the attention, and which is part of the criteria.
Yeah, one
but
thing.
just the websites were just helpful too. So
I think
in
one.
background,
Sorry.
and I just in communities, additional work that wasn't necessarily always in everything, but other communities that they've worked with.
Sorry, what I was going to suggest that's important is to actually look at the team. Is the team that's assembled the same team that's done the work that's examples of the work? Because you're going to get the product of the team that you get.
Right.
And so it could be different. And that's the part I want to go back and look a
That's
little more
right.
carefully at.
Yeah.
Because some of them I was looking at what I thought was a well thought out schedule, and what they were going to be doing, tasks within that, sort of I guess their work plan, and others, like wonderful graphic representation work that I think is really important for public understanding. But if that's not done, so the community engagement, some have a community engagement dedicated person. So these are the things that, like, if we look at what's going to put somebody above the other, if you were going to weigh the criteria, like, if we were going to weigh, we don't weigh those criteria right now, right? They're just there. So the work plan, for example, or the staffing, or, the level of experience, we don't say one of those is more important than another. But we have talked about some of that being more important, like how important community engagement aspect of it is.
And I think
But
we learned a lot from the village. I think going through that exercise was helpful for how important community engagement is in the process.
Well, the other thing I think that certainly that I learned was that having a way to communicate complicated zoning is really important, because the most common reaction to something, if people don't understand it, is to fear it. And so you have to be able to communicate it. And so that's a big part of what they need to do. So get sort of everybody on a common understanding, sort of where it's going, so that when you get to the end, it's not all chaos.
I'm much more interested in divvying up the phone calls right now.
All right.
Okay.
So let's
All right.
not leave before we figure that out.
Divvying up the phone.
It's just, like I always kind of think you can't always judge a book by its cover, so I'm inclined to having interviews, but I understand the whole time frame. So I don't know if Tim, you could reach out to the people and see what their schedule looks and see how quickly they can come in.
Well,
So-
I think what may be a good idea is just to sort of get to, and Maggie, I'm chasing after this. Just get something on the books and then decide on February 23rd if we want to do it or not. And then, so we're not waiting until 2 weeks from now to schedule something. We've got everyone kind of in a good place. And then we can just say, we're not doing interviews, forget about it. Or we've got something on the books.
There's also more effort required on our part to do the interviews because we need to have a set of questions that are the same questions asked of every one of them. So we have to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah, but also, I mean, I get the point of not like judging it, but I mean, there's a cost to those folks to do interviews. I do interviews a lot as a vendor. And I wouldn't want to take everybody in for an interview. My own opinion, I say you bring the top ones in, or if you have two people that you just can't pick between. That way we don't waste people's time.
Rich, I'll confirm this. I don't think that we have the option to pick. I think.
Oh, you have to interview everybody?
I think if we.
Or not.
This is my understanding of 30B right now.
My opinion, but I'll reserve the right to change it, is that we don't interview.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds crazy.
Yeah, let me, again, that's my understanding of it. I'll confirm with town council if I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah.
But we don't have to interview everybody on the team. Can't we just bring in the
Right. But it's like, so you can't say we're going to bring in, firm X and firm Y, and then we're not going to bring in firm A and firm B.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before. All right, yeah.
Well,
But really, it's only bringing in 4 people, because there are 4.
No,
right?
but they will, well, at
There's
least
still
in my
cost.
experiences, they're going to want to show their team. So
Yeah.
like if they're not going to just have like the principal in charge of the project manager because that won't show the depth of the team. I mean, that's my experience with interviews when our firm's been interviewed, but we bring in the team because there might be questions about something that one person doesn't have the most experience with. So in other words, you bring in somebody who's not the community engagement expert, for example, or who doesn't write the zoning, and they're not going to be as well versed.
So I'll get that confirmation, and then I'll do some coordination around a date with both the board and the firms, with the understanding that we may decide not to do interviews in the first place, but just so we've got a date on the books.
Good. Okay. That sounds good.
And the other thing, again, in my experience, have been sometimes the questions are sent to those firms in advance so they can prepare for it when they're at the interview, and they know who they should bring to the interview. So we would have to be prepared to get the questions together.
Yeah, I agree.
Probably at least a week in advance.
So do we want to pick a date now? Because we're saying it's not going to be at one of our regular scheduled meetings.
Well, I mean, so, probably the week after the 23rd, I think, would
Yeah.
be.
Do you want to send out a poll, like
And I just said they
independently,
will be
just
in
to,
a few days.
that way people can look at their calendars and just respond to Tim? Does that sound good? If they're, just a
Yeah.
sort of a save the date, if we do decide that this is what we want to do?
Just for what it's worth, I'm away that week of the 27th.
I'm away
February.
3 days of that week.
So maybe we do the following week and commit to making a decision that night. Because we want to get,
we want to get
cracking.
going. Yeah.
This is why I think it's important to get a sense of whether people think one firm rises to the top for them. I don't know. I have this, like I said, I want to go back and double check. But if that were the case, I don't know that we need to spend a month, to get through,
We might be able to decide on the 23rd.
Sounds good.
You might want to bring the results of reference checks to that meeting.
You say
Well,
nobody
subject-
volunteered to call them, huh?
Subject to, we could make a decision subject to reference checks.
I would be willing to call a couple, but I'm not calling 8, and I'm not
All right,
calling.
I'll also figure out how to arrange this. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Because we'll want to do at least one for each firm. So we'll figure that out.
And I would suggest that there become, again, the same set of questions asked
Yes.
of each reference.
Yeah.
And if
But
they
I don't mind calling anybody. I could call anybody if you give me the questions to ask.
Okay. Reference, check, question, and test. And then, so let's commit on the 23rd then to like everyone brings their spreadsheet of the evaluation criteria. So you've looked at all 4 firms, you've rated them on each criteria, you've come up with a composite criterion, so everyone has a rank, and then the board collectively comes up with its collective rank. Or you decide you want to have interviews and use that. Since I'm not a selector, I have opened the price proposals, I have seen them. That's all I'll say. That becomes another criteria. Once you've sort of gone through the sort of the qualitative stuff, then I will, it's like we can make it like a game show if we want, or we can just say what the prices are. And then basically the way that you're supposed to think about it is, you don't necessarily have to take the low bidder, but you also need to say, well, we think that the highly advantageous firm that maybe costs more money is worth it versus the next most advantageous firm, which may have a lower price, and sort of justify that. So, you have the jurisdiction and the discretion to do that, but you've got to explain why. So it may turn out that the most advantageous one is also the lowest priced one, and then bing, bang, boom, you're done. Or there may be a mix, and you've got to sort of discuss and kind of justify that.
Right.
So.
I have a question about I know in at least one of them, it's an over 1-year process, and that'll cross into 2 fiscal years then. So is that something that you've got figured out?
So the bulk of the funding from the grant is a 2-year contract.
Okay, so real
And then we'll want to spend the MPIC money first, because that's fiscal 23 money. Then we'll probably want to spend the grant money because we need to have a product by the end of fiscal 24. And then we also have funding from the South Shore Chamber of Commerce that is cash. So we just have it and we can probably spend it, we'll spend that last. But I think we should be good on that.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, sounds like we're in good shape with that. Okay. Is that it?
That's
for
it.
That? Okay. So we can move on. Old business. Anything else on MBTAs that you want to add at this time, Tim?
So just to kind
Look
of
for 'em.
show you a little bit of, my plan here is to reprise the presentation that I've given a couple different times. It's evolved from the first briefing I gave to the select board to the planning board. I was at a public forum a couple weeks ago where I gave a presentation. Just to sort of incorporate all of the sort of latest on the guidelines. But what I'm basically kind of presenting is here's what the guidelines are. Here's options for what compliance could look like. Here's what we've been doing. Here's what we plan to do in the future, and then open it up to comment. We have it's up on my whiteboard. We're in a 90-minute forum, at least half of that, if not more, for questions and comments. We've got a couple interactive features within, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to do Zoom, so we could sort of do polling. We can incorporate some other online survey features, just to get some sort of additional data from people who may not actually make comments. Independent of that, we've also, and I'll just kind of show you on screen share. Josh was able to make a survey that we've posted on the MBTA Communities website on the planning department page, which you can see on your screen. If you're watching at home, this is on the planning department page, MBTA Communities multifamily zoning requirement on that menu. We've got a advertisement for our forum. There's the link to that. And then we've got this survey, which also hypes up the meeting. And this is like a really general survey about kind of gauging people's knowledge of the program so far. So How have you learned about the MBTA community requirements? You know, all these different, I'm actually not going to fill out this survey. We want to find out where people live, you know, by precinct or if they're outside of Milton. You know, just some really general questions. One thing that is I think will hopefully be a helpful thing is, you know, we ask, you know, do we want to focus on the transit area? Do you want to have a district that's spread out? You know, that's kind of a fundamental question. It'll be good to have some, you know, just some input on that.
But do you give them any context for that? Like, if, in other words, if you said, like Maggie said at one time, if you put it all in one district, it's going to be high rises, and if you spread it out, then it'll be low rises. For
Yeah.
example.
So there's two questions that get after that. So it's like, do you want a big low density district or a small high density district? And then it's, do you want to have it entirely in the transit area or elsewhere in town?
Will you be able to tell if people who are living in the area are the ones who are saying they want that way or not? In other words,
If it says
if somebody's like living in precinct 9 like I do, and they say they want high density in precinct 2, well then, you know, that should be a different category than somebody who lives in precinct 2 and says I want high density in precinct 2.
Josh, we can suss that out, right? Because we'll have results just in a spreadsheet all down the line of all the questions, right?
That's correct. Yeah, each of the answers and each respondent's information, while anonymous, is sort of selected within each person. So we'll see how an individual selected and compare how they related to, say, this question to what district they live in exactly.
Yeah, so we're going to keep this survey up for a little bit. We'll publicize it again at the meeting itself. You know, I think we'll want to, as the process goes on, we'll want to do additional surveys and sort of update questions. But we can get a little bit of data here, and we've already gotten a fair amount of comments. Josh and I went out, we posted in a bunch of the public parks, we posted flyers at each of the T stations. There's one in the library, there's one in the Council on Aging, and then it went out through all of the normal kind of electronic channels. So we've gotten an okay amount of responses so far, some
So can I just make one
colorful
suggestion?
comments, some useful comments, some
This
that
is
are
good.
not so useful.
I didn't even know about this survey yet, so if
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest. It seems as if the select board, you know, audience is pretty large. So do they have a meeting between now and the 16th where they can make an announcement about the meeting and the survey?
I mean, they're meeting before town meeting, but I don't think that's televised in the same way. But
Well, maybe Bob Hiss can make it, announcement.
Was this put in the paper?
I'd have to check and see. We did talk to Elaine
forum
Carroll
is-
about it.
The forum is in there.
Is it? Okay.
But it doesn't have
Okay.
anything about the survey.
Well, if people come to the forum, they'll know about the survey because we
Or
won't
even if they
shut up
look
about
up
it.
the forum on the website,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So the flyer that we put up is a QR code to the survey, and then the survey sends you to the forum. You know, it's got a link to that and everything. So that's the thing.
Nice,
We didn't want to put up a flyer for the meeting because then we'd have to go back out and do it. They're laminated. We're gonna leave them up for a bunch of weeks, and so that'll just be, you know, some data points, you know, just to get an idea of kind of where folks are at. And we're developing an email list through this survey. So the final question is, if you want more information, give us your email, and so then we'll.
I think a announcement would be really helpful, because then the town meeting members from the precincts who would be in that catchment, 1/2 mile catchment area, can at least go back, and if they've got a neighborhood association or a way to reach out. I know there was at one time, that I don't know if they still do it, but the town meeting members from precinct 2 would gather together. And but it's really important that they know about the survey and fill it out, since
Yeah.
they're the ones who are absolutely impacted by it.
So I'll reach out to the moderator tomorrow
Okay.
and see if he can.
Can we print, not we, I mean, I could, but could, we print out a survey and hand it to town meeting members? Because most likely they might fill it out during town meeting, and then if we have a drop box, they could drop it in as they leave.
That might be a bigger ask. of?
Because then they'd have to download everything because it electronically feeds in. Yeah.
I mean, we could print it out. I don't want to impose on town meeting too much
How
2 days
about
before.
there's a table usually at the front, and if you had a flyer, at least there, that had the QR code, at least
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
get people some people that way.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we've got additional copies of the flyer that
Yeah.
can be distributed.
Yeah.
I'll also note that the survey's been translated into Spanish and Chinese for additional accessibility.
Great.
French, you should do French.
Absolutely do French. We have a community here that speaks
I think
French.
I think what did we use? We used an AI that wasn't able to do French. That's
It wasn't able to do Haitian Creole, which
Alright.
is what we were looking for.
Well, if we do French, we maybe can ask the French department, or depending.
Get some kids, give them a kid some community service hours.
Exactly.
Ooh la la.
The high school.
That'd be good.
So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping for a good turnout. You know, we're trying to sort of leave enough time for questions and comments. The thing, and the reason I you know, we'll figure out some in-person engagement, and especially, you know, when we get a consultant on, you know, we'll do that. I like the nimbleness of a remote meeting. It's really easy for us to publicize it. It's really easy for us to manage it and kind of get the most bang for your buck out of you know, a remote meeting.
What I will say about that too, if I may, is that some people are not comfortable speaking in public if they think that they have something to say that people might not agree with. So you're just more likely to get honest, you know, feedback from an anonymous survey.
Yeah, and I think, you know, these are all ultimately, you know, data points. You know, someone comes and testifies at a meeting, that's a data point. You know, their survey results, those are data points. You know, and it's eventually, you know, town meeting will be the ultimate data point. So I think hitting the town meeting members is going to be a great idea. I think that was a really good suggestion. And I'm not trying to, I just, you know, town meeting is a really intricately choreographed thing. I don't want to like give someone a call tomorrow and be like, hey, I need to give 250 surveys to people.
Just that this special town meeting is light on articles, so
yeah, so
it's a good opportunity.
It's a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Versus May, for example.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll.
The other thing is, can we share it on Facebook, on maybe some of the Milton Facebook pages?
So
it's on Facebook and Twitter from the town.
Yeah, we put it up on the town social media. You all are more plugged into other town social media networks than I am.
We've got your permission to share.
Maggie, it's out there. It's public.
Okay.
It's not mine anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Good questions. Okay. And then Tim, I don't know if you want to say anything about the potential low impact design and software.
Yeah, so Mira wasn't able to join us for our last meeting. I wasn't sure how long she was going to be out. She's back in action. But I figured with the public hearing, you know, we'll want to get her in soonish, just because we'd like to get cracking on this stuff. But it's, you know, obviously it's not necessarily as time sensitive as a public hearing. So
I'm really interested in this though.
Yeah, and what I can do is, you know, regardless of when it's on the schedule, I will send out some of the materials. We may have sent some of this stuff out already, but you know, just the presentation she intends on giving and some of the backup materials. Especially, we have this Mass Audubon tool that basically helps us evaluate all of our existing regulations compared with, you know, here's a bad policy, here's a good policy, here's a best practice. You know, so it's really good. You could conceivably go and say, all right, we're going to amend all of our stuff to be consistent with best practices. It would be an immense task, but you could do it if you wanted.
Because one thing I would think is like on the stormwater management and low impact design, like doing the green roof, for example, as 440 Granite is proposing, is one of those recommendations. And, you know, they're offering it on this, but we might want to make it a requirement, you know, places, for example?
Yeah.
So that we're getting that, because they don't have this, because everything's paved already.
Yeah.
They're not increasing the runoff, so they don't have to do as much.
Right.
Really, by law. But we see what happens if you do have to do a lot, is these huge structures, which are terrible. What's that, Tim?
I know,
I
tell me
was
about
sharing my screen the whole time, so everyone saw my notes.
Oh.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I take notes during the meetings in an email. That's nothing scandalous there.
Thank you.
Maggie's laughing, but she didn't tell me that I was still sharing my screen.
All right, so that's good. So
Yeah.
more to hear from that. That's great. Okay. Anything else, Tim?
Can I just ask, and I know it's not on the agenda, but are we going to be talking about the codification?
Yeah, when we have, we'll have zoning on
Because
the
that's
agenda in
coming
the
up,
fir-
right?
Yeah. So
Okay, I just want to make sure we're tracking that.
Just a quick update on that, so we don't run afoul of agenda stuff. Probably tomorrow, we're going to get an announcement out. We'll probably put it on the town website and social media, but especially out to town meeting members. We've built, because we're doing both the zoning bylaws and the general bylaws. General bylaws don't require the same level of public hearing as the zoning bylaws. So we're trying to keep them separate but lockstep. So the town clerk is going to have a page on her site. We're going to have a page on our site for zoning. Just sort of walking people through, here's what we're doing, here's the materials that our consultant provided to help you kind of evaluate this stuff, here's the existing bylaw so you can compare it side by side, and just get that out to everybody. Warrant committee, town meeting members, general public, you all.
When are we going to hold the public hearing on it?
We'll have to figure that out.
We'll need to.
Yeah, that's, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the select board has put it forth on.
for May.
Yeah, so
May.
it's on the warrant.
On
so
the warrant.
Okay.
So whether we approve it or not, it's already on
yeah,
there. So-
between now and the beginning of May.
But we will have to have a public hearing.
Okay,
for
so
that.
we have, all right,
Yeah.
thanks. I
There's
just wanted
time,
to,
but we'll want to,
Yeah.
Yep.
and I
as we
think there's
think about, like, these meetings earlier that we talked about and these continued hearings, I just
right.
want to think through.
And there's a balance between, you want to have enough time for everyone to kind of digest things so that your public hearing is meaningful, but also, you want to leave some time in case you have to continue that hearing. So I think, yeah.
That would be great.
So actually, I just thought of something. So on that survey for the MBTA, I know Sean has, put some time into doing a very rough general cost analysis. Should there be like a question that we're asking the residents if, do you support this if it comes at a cost, and at what cost is the breaking point? Or is it too premature for that now?
I mean, I would say it is premature. I think I've seen Sean's numbers. I think just especially given the fact that we're going to be putting some resources behind a more rigorous analysis, I'd want to have that question be accompanied by that. I think Sean will admit that it's rigorous, but not as rigorous as a team of economists could do. So I think we'd want to pair that type of question with some data, like here's the facts, because I think that's really what you're looking for is, I think right now we really don't know, and so the answers that you're going to get back are not going to be kind of rooted in anything except for people's opinions. But I think when. And this is why I said, like, we'll want to kind of adjust our surveying capabilities as the process goes along, because we're going to be learning things from consultants, we're going to be learning things from the public, we're going to be learning things from each other. As we go along, we're going to want to continually test that information and get input on it. So I think, the survey is easy enough to put together. Josh was able to put it together pretty quickly. So I think we can be nimble in that regard in terms of getting feedback on a kind of almost real-time basis. So
Because I just feel like most people you know, we all do it. Unless it's affecting us, we don't really get involved or we don't pay attention. So, you know, if it all is going to go in one area or two areas of town, most of the town might say, oh, I'm not worried about it. But then they should be worried about it because it will affect their taxes or schools or whatever. So I don't know the correct answer, but I just put it out there. The more that people know, I think, the better. And I don't want to be an alarmist either, but really, you get people involved when they think about how is it going to affect me.
No, but I think there is a time and a place for that sort of question. We're still relatively preliminary.
So one way to handle that maybe is to have some information that says, yes, there will be direct impacts in particular areas, but there could be impacts throughout the whole town. You know, it's just to get people at least to be aware that they should be paying attention if they think, okay, I live over, you know, far away from that area where the trolley is. But you don't have to say what the impacts even are. You know, I don't think. I think we just say that there's the potential for impacts townwide, and that people need to be concerned about it regardless of whether they live within a half mile of the trolley or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can, I think as the process goes on, I think keep in mind, we've got the capability to ask these questions. We can kind of bundle them together and get them out there in relatively short order.
Great.
But the survey's already out there right now, so I'm not changing it for another couple weeks.
But you did allow for a comment for if people want to email with comments, because you said you've gotten some.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a way to categorize and catalog some of those.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Yes, no, maybe, like where are we getting a sense in the town of
Right.
where we are?
There's some multiple choice. There's some short form, answer form. So once we've got a bundle of data, and we'll probably wait until after the forum because I think we'll get a lot of people filling it out after that. We'll try to get it to you in a kind of coherent format.
Great.
You all still have to drive home, so interest of time, I think we beat this one.
In my back.
All right. So
Motion
with
to
that,
adjourn?
motion to adjourn? Yes. And
Yes,
second? Maggie was a second? Or,
Yes.
okay, roll call. Rich?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes,
And myself, yes. Good evening.
we pulled off a hybrid.
Good night, everybody.
I know.
Good night,
Congratulations,
guys.
Wes. Bye. Thank
All right.
you.
Tim, sometime can we get, you may be familiar, but there's a lot happening.